Agenda is resident concerns. I will say tonight that during the discussion of selection of officers, we won't be taking public input at that time. So if you have comments on the selection of officers, please make them now.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Is it true that we don't have the Zoom meeting going yet?
The Zoom meeting is running, and there are 6 remote attendees.
Okay, thank you.
So please go ahead.
I'm Tara from West Acton, and I have 3 things to speak about.
Can I hold you just a second?
And a question.
If others would like to speak, please line up behind
line
the
up,
microphone.
Guys.
I don't want to have to wait for people to change. Please go ahead.
Okay, so in my view, people of privilege are well represented in the committees. I'll wait. Hopefully my 2 minutes will start when you guys are listening.
No, I'm listening.
No, I mean, whatever time you need.
No, go ahead.
Good? Okay. So in my view, people of privilege, various privileges, color of their skin, income, property ownership, are well represented on the committees in Acton. This is a time for justice, yes. Affordability of taxes is a justice issue, and it's critical. But we already have representatives on the FinCom and on the ALG that are very concerned about keeping taxes low. The Select Board is about values. And now is the time for justice, for housing justice, for environmental justice. It's about more than just money. And so I urge that you elect a chair that stands for inclusion, that stands for justice in all of their being. Thank you. I have a concern about Hayward Road. I think that the butters should be noticed before there's any votes on any plan to put any light. The lady in Prospect Street on Main Street said it best. She didn't want people idling in front of her house at lights. And so I think it's important to not vote on anything until you hear from the neighbors and that they are notified by mail the quarter acre around, so you can get these guys in here to give you their views. I also have a question about West Acton Citizens Library. The trustees are very gentle people, and they've been told they have no choices in some kind of upcoming reorganization, and I would like very much to hear from the town manager whether or not he will respect their wishes.
So we don't take questions now. Some board members may make comments if they wish, but
all right, well, I will ask my Himija, who's the liaison.
So we don't take questions now.
Oh, we don't
if she
take
wants
questions?
to comment, she can comment.
I hope she does comment. Oh, she does. Oh, she's, I guess, saying that, yes, they will respect. Okay. Thank you very much. If I'm not mistaken, please say something before Wednesday's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Virginia Loftus. I live at Windsor Green, all renters, 7,000 in the town. We need a voice. We need simpatica workmanship with you. We need to not only be heard, but the contents of what we need to be heard has to be heard. We need a consciousness that's joint. We need to be heard and considered as town residents. Not everybody is citizens, but as town residents, we must have a voice. And a voice where there's a joining of the brains and thoughts. You're running the town, we need to work with you, and you need to work with us.
Thank you.
Ruth Thatcher, Prospect Street. I'm also here in favor of to support the renter advocate, and I just want to make sure that the members of the select board received the letter from the West Acton Baptist Church in support of the renters also. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Berry from Faulkner Hill Road. I urge the Select Board to rotate officers during tonight's meeting for 2 important reasons. First is to maintain the essential nonpartisan nature of town government. Select Board members do not run as Democrats or Republicans, nor on the basis of any particular political ideology, but on your commitment to support the best interests of the entire town. The chair also cannot be elected based on partisan political viewpoints. If the board were to devolve into a partisan body based on politics, The board would become simply another politically divided entity which would further divide rather than unite our town. The International City Managers Association warns that partisanship is incompatible with the regular duties of local government. The ICMA comments local governments rely on relationships, collaboration, and compromise to solve problems and provide services. Injecting the partisan divide into local decisions may very well degrade the crucial relationships and trust required to solve local issues. In local government, our relationships are much more important than party and ideology. Local government officials typically use their roles to build community trust and healthy relationships rather than contribute to disagreement and bickering. When governing bodies meander from their proper roles, things will get messy fast. Second reason is the inherent nature of the Select Board as an elected body. You represent the will of Acton's voters. The voters who elected you deserve to have their interests represented in the chair. This is particularly true for the members who receive the highest number of votes. For these reasons, I urge the board to elect Dean Charter chair and Jim Snyder Grant vice chair, both of whom possess the most important skills required of the Select Board chair: leadership, the ability to work collaboratively, and knowledge of town government. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michelle Parag. I am from Brook Street. I have been living and or working in this community for quite some time, and both as a tenant resident and representing a lot of elderly they are very intimidated by their landlords, by the town, and they're not getting anywhere. I, for one, have lived under a management that just sold and didn't tell their tenants that they were. You go and ask for something to be done, nothing gets done. It's in violation of the Board of Health, the building code, everything. And I personally have been to them, and nothing has been followed up with that owner, former Universal Properties, to get anything done. You go to Strawberry Hill, to Acton Housing Authority, whether it be elder or property-based, they are doing nothing either for these tenants. Many with physical and mental health issues, cognitive limitations, they cannot stand up for themselves. I am in a role where I am not to do it, or I could lose my job. So I would appreciate if there was a tenant advocate on here who reached out to these people, reached out to the elderly and disabled. We're available to somebody like me who can get a less dangerous tenancy in a building that probably should have been condemned years ago, but has not, to get safety into Strawberry Hill Apartments where veterans live. Our own military veterans live in there, and you can walk in any time of day. There are guns, there's prostitution, and there are drugs. Do you think they deserve that? In addition to the fact that they're elderly and impaired? They don't even have locks on the main doors or buzzes. Come on. So I support the position of a renter's advocate and a turnover of the chairs and vice chairs, and I hope Selectman Snyder Grant gets that chair position, and honestly, something needs to be done. You have control over this. Acton Housing is a state but town-run facility. Come on. Are we going to allow our elderly to be walking like a cockroach because we can't respect them enough to give them clean water, safety bars, non-mold apartments and tubs and access, please? I work for Piddles to keep them safe. When will you help them do the same? Respect them. They've been here much longer than me and deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to let you know that we have, some months ago, opened up a renters hotline. It has been very successful. There have been tens of reports. I think all of them have been resolved. So especially if there are really health problems and things like that, I urge people to call the renters hotline. Thank you.
Good evening. Mike here. I'm Mike Gowing. I'm here to speak to the Select Board reorganization of officers. Having been a selectman for 6 years, I'm very aware of the process of electing officers to the position of clerk, chair, and vice chair. The reasons that people historically start out as clerk to understand the workings of local government, including mass law as it affects municipalities, then move to vice chair, shadow the chair, learn all of the intricacies of the budget process, and then as chair, direct the board's efforts to accommodate the town's needs. This process has been in place for more years than people can remember. It is inherent in the nonpartisan town government. This upcoming year will be a difficult one, as inflation continues, federal and state monies decline, and Proposition 2.5 will limit what we can afford to do. We need to have someone who has not only been involved in town budget, but has the experience of actually creating a budget. Dean, as Municipal Properties Director for many years, has done just that. Finally, I would appeal to the board that prides itself on fairness and equity to conduct themselves accordingly. Dean was passed over as chair last year, even though he had done his due diligence as vice chair. This is not a popularity contest. It's a progression. If it were a popularity contest, I would point out that Dean won every precinct in town. But that's not the point. The role of chair should pass to him this year. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Janet Adachi, Simon Hepburn Lane. It shouldn't be necessary for me to weigh in on tonight's Select Board officer election, but given last year's aberrant election process, I feel I must. Dean Charter should have been the Select Board chairman this past year. I urge the Select Board to make amends for last year and elect him chairman tonight. The Select Board has had an orderly officer selection process for years, as Mr. Gowing described, going back long before my own 9-year tenure on the Select Board from 2010 to 2019. If you want to be chairman, first do a year as clerk, then a year as vice chairman. The process is not just some outdated formality, but makes good sense, which is why it has endured and should continue as standard practice. When I was winding down my first stint as Select Board clerk, 3 of my colleagues wanted me to agree to be chairman. I knew that I'd be a capable chairman, but declined to deviate from the established officer rotation. Ignoring the usual officer selection process would have needlessly upset the then vice chairman, and I also believed that serving as vice chairman would better prepare me to serve as chairman. I said that I'd aim to be a strong vice chairman, working closely with the new chairman and town manager. And that is what I did, with no regrets and excellent results. The local re-election results earlier this year confirmed that Mr. Charter enjoys strong support in all precincts. A lifelong resident and retired longtime municipal employee, he understands the town's history and government operations in a way that no other current Select Board member can come close to matching. He is able to listen to and work collaboratively with people holding diverse opinions, which is a crucial skill for any Select Board member, but especially for the chairman. Please do the right thing this year. Elect Dean Charter as chairman and Mr. Snyder Grant as vice chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Rosenzweig Morton, 26 Marshall Path. I'm a former planning board member, economic development committee member, and select board member for 2 terms. And I'm not going to repeat what my colleagues have already said. I see there's a long line. We are all neighbors, whether you're a renter, whether you're a citizen or not a citizen, or you own your own home, we are all neighbors. And Dean was elected by a lot of people, and he may have not learned as much or been up to speed as much as some of you other members have been on certain topics, but he's been shown that he is willing to learn, that he is open to taking input. I have never, the CPC, when he chaired that, was an excellent, he received excellent accolades from everyone on how he led the committee, how he brought people to consensus, and I think he would do an excellent job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Eric Hill for Orchard Drive. In my 20 years as a homeowner and a resident in Acton, I have felt exceptionally well supported from the kind of built-in advocacy that homeowners enjoy in this town. And I would like to see the same level of support extended to everyone who lives here. It's really come to my attention, and I've been aware over that 22 years, how conspicuously absent the inclusion of renters in our decision-making process, and even in any form of major visibility and involvement in town government has been. For those reasons, I would really like to see a chair of this board be a strong advocate for that position of the study and the placement of a renter's advocate, and someone who has been a demonstrated bridge builder and pulling people together. And I really feel that Jim Snyder Grant fits that description. And at this unique time, when it's so important that we pull together, I would like to see Jim as the chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leslie Johnson. I live on Brook Street, and I'd like to see a renter's advocate. I'm a renter and subsidized housing. There are a lot of renters in subsidized housing that have disabilities, that are immigrants, that are senior citizens and other vulnerable people, and I think they need an advocate to work for them. And I'd also like to see a chair that would be supportive of a rental advocate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Danny Factor, 11 Davis Road, apartment A5. I wanted to speak on two topics. The first has to do with the fact that the organized renters organization, Housing Climate Justice for Acton, appreciates the fact that we now have a renters hotline, but it should be made clear that their position is clear, that it's not enough and that we need a renters advocate. And if you folks don't already know the reasons already, you can call a forum and we'll come and we'll tell you why. If anyone is under the conception that having the renters hotline is enough, then we need to increase the amount of listening that is going on in town. And there are a lot of ways to do that. Now, as far as chair, let's admit, first of all, that this is an important position. I think if it was just a token position, and if it wasn't an important position, we wouldn't have this many people here caring about it. Let's talk about two important things that the chair does. They set the agenda. That's something that's very important when you're dealing with the issue of communities that feel marginalized. There's a certain sensitivity when it comes to knowing how to set an agenda that is inclusive. The second amount of discretion that a chair has is at meetings itself. It has to do with a degree of respect that you give the audience. It has to do with when you decide to cut somebody off or when you want to be a little more sensitive to someone who is vulnerable. So this is why a lot of vulnerable people in our community care about this. The last thing I want to say about the chair is that there's been some talk from other people like being able to be a chair is a right once you're elected to the board. That everybody gets their turn, and that's the way that it's always been. I see being a chair as such an important role that it's not a right, but it's a privilege. It's a privilege that's given to somebody who has certain abilities to listen and to be sensitive and to especially be open to new issues when they first come up, not later as well, because it's the first voice that you're going to hear when you bring a new matter. I myself was on the Commission on Disabilities.
You're on time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Kennedy Perez. I live at 33 Harris Street, and I'm here about the Renters Advocate. I actually think you have enough information, and I'll say that on two things. One is, there have been calls, I do know that. Given what Wynn Residential has just learned about the condition of 250 apartments in this town, clearly you should have been getting millions of calls, like thousands of calls, because those buildings are in terrible shape. One of the one of the people who oversees the care of the buildings, said to me that she had, in her many years of managing buildings, never seen some buildings as damaged as these are. She also at the same time said she's never seen people keep their apartments as clean as people here have. So that's not a reflection on tenants. If people felt more comfortable speaking to an institution, which your hotline is part of the city, it's an institution, different than someone who's identified as an advocate, really, you need to bring Wynn in here and ask them to talk to you about what they have found. You would be appalled. I know when I heard, rats, trash not being picked up for weeks on end, mold under carpets, bedrooms filling up with water on a regular basis, and that's what I can just pull off the top of my head. It's, you need this other person. Because truly, and I know towns need to be able to prove that there's a need. I know you need to be able to prove that. I'm just saying, I think you have the information. I think you just need to bring Wynn in here and ask them to talk to you about what they found. Which, by the way, when Universal left, Wynn has none of our phone numbers and none of our email addresses. They have no clue because Universal took it with them. If there was someone who was paying attention to these things differently than just letting housing management companies run amok, you would have your proof. And I guess about the, so I've lived in cities where there were, well, like the mayor's position rotated. And, you know, it worked okay.
Seconds.
Pardon me?
15 seconds left.
Okay, but it was a figurehead. It wasn't anybody who really had any power. So food for thought.
Thank you.
Hi, Simon Morton, Townhouse Lane. I'm a condo owner. Many of my neighbors are tenants. Many of our neighbors across the town of Acton are tenants. I'm really have been shocked over the last sort of 6 to 9 months at hearing about some of the conditions that some renters are living under. And you know, they're all our neighbors. They all deserve to live in dignity and safe and affordable housing. And so I would like to strongly urge the select board to take, you know, strong affirmative action on tenants' rights and to support the creation of the tenant rights position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Christopher Lopez, Central Street. So I am a renter in Acton. I've coming up on my year lease. And so the story of, just a brief story of just me, I've enjoyed this town a lot. I've really enjoyed the people in this town, the small businesses, how close we are to nature. And I think a lot of the people here have so many wonderful things to contribute to this town. But every time I think about it, living here is not something that I enjoy for the specific reason that living in an apartment can be a struggle when a lot of the issues we face is decisions that our apartment owners make on our behalf. And it's hard for us to speak up, but even when we do speak up, and I have multiple times, we're just faced with no response or a non-response, and where we are either being told to reread something we've already read so many times, or we are just being directed towards just a dead end. So this has been a story that's been repeated over and over through my canvassing, through my organization, Housing Climate Justice for Acting, and to see this replicated in other places and worse conditions. Compared to mine, I'm living in luxury, but there's definitely others who are not in the best conditions, and because they can't or have tried and only left with dead ends, they are seeking the town for help. So I really, really hope that the town can take in consideration that there's more that's needed for our renters. And with that being said, I think the town also needs to make sure that we're represented in a way that makes sure our voices are heard. And I think you've seen time and time again, we are definitely trying to raise our voices ourselves, but we need some help. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jennifer Marazza, Central Street. So I am all for nonpartisanship and procedural, likening to procedures and adhering to them. But I'm also disappointed in how our group was received when we first made our voices heard to the select board, and comments that were made that disparaged us for no reason except for the fact that we were renters bringing up concerns. I have been a renter my entire life. I've always been close to my landlords. My grandmother and grandfather are landlords. I have no animosity towards landlords. I have a concern about the condition of renting in Acton. That's my concern. We have talked to established Housing Stability Office, who has told us that putting a hotline up on a website is not a trusted resource. They told us that they went through the school system, the faith communities, the rental buildings, all to gain the trust of the communities in order to get people to call them. That's what's needed. So our organization has canvassed. We've canvassed over 1,000 people in town, and we've compiled concerns that we will be bringing to you in the coming meetings. And we're only looking for those reasonable concerns to be received and to be acknowledged and to be dealt with, and for the folks that are neglecting a third of the people in Acton to be held accountable. Thank you.
Hi, Franny Osmond, 16 Half Moon Hill. I'm here to talk about 3 things in my allotted time. One is the technology of town meeting. I had a conversation with the chair recently, and he thought it was difficult to set up a Zoom so that people watching at home and participating from home could see who's talking. It's very frustrating and very non-community forming to be at home and not see who's talking. Right now, people on Zoom can't see me.
Just 1 second, you mean select board meetings?
Yes.
You said town meeting.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
Select board
meetings. Yeah, select board meetings. All it takes is putting a laptop over there on that table and shining it on the audience. People at home on Zoom can't see that I see dozens and dozens of people here. I didn't count. They can't see that. They should be able to. Please make this happen. Number 2, I'm so inspired by the work of the Housing and Climate for Justice in Acton group. And I just was marching with the group up to town hall. I'm very excited. When I was on the select board, we were aware of the fact that we weren't hearing from renters enough, but we didn't do enough. And when the organization climatemobilization.org got involved and helped organize us, I'm very grateful. And to all the renters who have been speaking up, and I think that we're on a good roll. And so I trust that the board will move ahead with that and continue to hear the voices of that group. Number 3, the select board roles. I implore you to not be partisan about it. I think it's not, I liked going along with, and it's not a matter of, oh, we always done it that way. It was for good reason, that people would learn to learn about being on the board. And I was dismayed by the process last year, and I think it should be the order that it goes, unless someone's really heinous. But everybody has their ups and downs. Everybody has their experiences of not being so good, we don't expect you to be perfect select board members. We expect you to try and learn and be better. And I would hope that Dean would be the next chair and Jim the next vice chair. Thanks.
Claire Siska, Stowe Street. I will try to paraphrase, just state that I do agree with Mr. Gowing and Mr. Perry and the others before me in terms of the leadership on the board. Over the past year, I've been really disheartened, to say the least, to hear from many residents who feel that the current board leadership has not done a good job of listening to citizens' concern and is driving its own agenda. This has been brought up both on the street and openly at select board meetings. This is not personal, but I've lived in this town for 28 years and have never, ever heard so many people come up to me and just say, this has got to change, this is not right. So as a select board, your job is to represent the people, and I'm asking you to listen to what the people are saying, is that they want to change on the board. I won't repeat, everybody knows Mr. Charter's experience. I have very different political views from him, but that doesn't matter to me. I respect his leadership, and my experience is that he has been open to hearing other people's points of view and to changing his perspective once he's got new information. Mr. Snyder-Grant, I've had the pleasure of knowing for many, many years. He's dedicated much of his life to the town on multiple roles. He has a lot of experience doing mediation kind of work. And I will close by adding that the current focus of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community should be reflected in the selection of the select board. And diversity is not just about race or gender or sexual orientation, it's also about how you approach things. And so I would like to see a different approach to the board, and I urge you to elect Dean Charter as chair and Jim Snyder-Grant as vice chair to promote that diversity and to demonstrate that you're listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Carol Enright at 44 Brewster Lane, condo owner. Why did we march today? We marched because Housing and Climate Justice for Acton has worked hard with the renters in this town to spread the word for the need for a renter's advocate. In our investigations through canvassing, we found a growing need for mediation between the renters and their landlords. You've heard all this tonight. I just add my voice to their wonderful efforts, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madeline Cruz, Townhouse Lane. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I hear so many people around town saying that over the last year, and yet a person like me has yet to feel some of that. Some of you want to recognize, and some of you don't. But at the end of the day, renters are a part of this town, and we deserve to be included. There's a lot of things that the town needs to do better to make that happen. And I'm gonna start off by saying too, there's nothing more disappointing than having people who work for our town government that, yeah, I get it, you work 9 to 5, but you always represent this town, whether you're a select board, town manager, social services. If you work for the town of Acton, you represented it even when you're off hours. So many of you see me and say hello, but there's other of you that have seen me in the past and haven't even acknowledged me. Do you know how awful that feels? It makes me feel like trash. Acknowledgement and accountability go a long way. On October 18th, I came here and I presented my story. So many of you did acknowledge that there was a problem that needed to be fixed, but so many of you put me down, trashed my name, and made it seem like I'm this crazy person. Oh my God, this woman of color coming up here degrading Acton housing. And you know, tonight was the first night that Peter Barry said hello to me. Thank you, Mr. Barry. You made me feel good tonight. I thank you for that change. However, it shouldn't take this long. We need change. A lot of people don't like it, but you know what? It's inevitable. Change is growth. Growth means that we're coming a long way. I don't ever want to hear someone say, I don't belong here. I do belong here. And I recently applied for the Human Services Committee, and I was told, whether it's gossip or not, Some people don't want me. Why don't you want me? Because I say truth? That's not my problem. I hope that you take an accountability, my experience as a person, as a human being. Please remember, housing is a human right. It's a need. You want to help end homelessness? This is how you do it. We do need a renter's advocate. And Mr. Dean, I hope that when you take the chair, because I have no doubt that you will tonight, you please try to understand people like me, reach out and speak to us, because we deserve that from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Van Meter, Half Moon Hill. I want to congratulate the town for taking initial steps toward recognizing the needs of renters, but urge you to make investigating the gaps in service and the needs of renters and others in town around housing stability in the next year. I also, although I understand Ms. Cruz's feelings and those of other people, I believe that Mr. Charter can serve the town well as chair, and I hope that the board elects him and Mr. Snyder Grant as vice chair later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann Chang, South Acton Swamps, not a renter. I'd like to say that if in fact you do a renting advocate, that you are conscious of the fact that we are getting a top-heavy administration, and that you should delete some other member of the administration, or maybe combine that job with some other job, so that we do not have so many people who are in the administration, because we have to pay their salaries. And I think that is something that we should consider. And the reason that people had a progress for the chair, vice chair, and the clerk on the Board of Selectmen is that the chair was supposed to help teach the clerk and the vice chair the fiscal policies of the town. And as you grow in stature and more knowledge, you gain the competence to do the town budget and to do the taxes, and God forbid, perhaps even do the thing for Prop 2.5.
Thank you. I'm not going to take duplicate. You both have been up to speak. No, I'm not taking you again. I'm sorry.
Just say one thing, sir. I didn't know about the renters hotline.
So you can talk to one of us after. Thank you. Are there any online people who'd like to speak? I see one hand. Matt, are you calling on people tonight?
Yes, I apologize. I was having a little bit of technical difficulties. Heather Morton, you should be able to speak.
Hi, this is the very first time I've done this over Zoom, so I'm not quite sure how it works. Is this an appropriate time to talk about the one-way street on River Street? Nobody else has spoken to that.
No,
or is there going to be a later part of the meeting?
So this is more for general comments, and also tonight comments on the select board officers. We will be taking comments on the hearing for the one-way street in a short, not very long.
I have nothing to say then, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, this user does not have their full name, but their username is Dick and Peggy T. If they can identify themselves and tell us where they're from.
Yes, Richard and Margaret Testa on Juniper Ridge Road, West Acton. We'd like to echo the many supportive comments for Dean Charter as the next chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll see what we can do for calling people later. We'll see if we can get that volume up.
Any volume would be good.
You mean when I speak, or when the person speaks?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm just asking which is which. Okay, so we're all hard to see here. So we just raised the volume a little bit.
The audio is much better back here. The speaker is shooting up over your head. Sorry.
Okay, we'll move on. Comments from me tonight. It's exciting to see all you people here tonight. There are, not only is there's more people than we've had in the room in 2.5 years, maybe a little longer actually. It's about 4 times as many people as are online. So that's cool. Thank you all for your comments on renters tonight. Two things about that I'd like to comment on there. One is we established this renter hotline, I think maybe 4 months ago, 3-4 months ago. We've been able to satisfy the vast majority of problems reported on that hotline. I would encourage people to use it because in addition to possibly getting your issue resolved, if we can't resolve your issue, then we'll make note of that. As far as the renter advocate goes, I want to make it clear that to everybody that we're not dismissing people's concerns. The renter's advocate is a complicated thing and needs a lot of thought. I suspect that we'll be discussing this quite a bit at our goal-setting session this year. 3 things happened this past week of note. In the middle of last week, Household Goods cut the ribbon on their new addition, which is a new building that they call the Barn, and a big addition on their main building. It's very exciting for their operations, and one of the things that they'll be able to do in the new space is to take tractor trailer load shipments of things from places. Secondly, last Thursday, the school committee announced that the committee to select the new mascot has chosen a name. It's the AB Revolution. It was done in a student-led process. So that's very exciting. And then finally, last Friday, the Habitat for Humanity project on Carlisle Road had its official groundbreaking. That the house on 26 Carlisle Road was, to say it was run down is quite an understatement. It's being replaced with a new house, and as of now, the work is beginning. It'll probably take the rest of the year. And a family, it'll be an affordable housing unit, which will be rented out. Sold in town. So that's also exciting. Mr. Manager, your update.
Thank you. 2 brief items there. The Celebrations Committee, James McCrae, our Veterans Officer, and Gail Sawyer are coordinating a parade for Memorial Day. It'll be starting at the high school at 10 a.m. and make its way up Main Street and then go down Concord Road to Woodlawn Cemetery. So that's on Monday at 10 a.m. On May 31st, which is a week from tomorrow, we will be having a webinar to announce the preliminary findings of the work that the Collins Center from the UMass Boston has been doing. We hired them earlier this year to help us to formulate a job description and identify an appropriate role within the organization for an diversity and equity officer. Their work is nearly completed. Before they submit their final report to the town, they are going to be reading out and sharing some of their preliminary findings for people to have a heads up on and understand. And that's it's actually at 8:15 at night. It's a virtual only meeting, and it's Tuesday, 5/31, May 31st.
Thank you. Does any member have a member minute? Jim.
Couple of things. It's a few pages back. I had to take a lot of notes. On May 28th, near a park, the adaptive bike program is starting up. So there's 3 bikes available for residents to take out on the rail trail for up to 3 hours for free, and I look forward to seeing this program be a great success. The other thing that's happening, community groups are now able to start reserving rooms, for example, at the public safety facility or right here in this building or the library, and that's happened. I had the honor of working with one of the Housing and Climate Justice and Acton groups to use this room. Using this room on the weekends does require a select board member, since normally this building is locked on the weekends. So one of the advantages of getting space in the library and the public safety facilities, they're open on weekends. That was it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other members? Member Minute? Imogen.
Very quickly, just wanted to address Tara's point on the West Acton Citizens Library. They have a meeting coming up this week, and it's a public meeting, so if anyone wants to come, they can. From what, I'll just say this, we're definitely very dedicated to making sure that we are taking care of our West Acton Citizens Library. We realize it's an important part of our town, and we do have many changes, thank you, going on with our Memorial Library leadership as well as West Acton's leadership, and so we're definitely trying to accommodate everyone, and at this meeting we'll definitely be talking about that more and what that looks like for our board of trustees on both ends. So we're definitely dedicated to that on the town staff side, as well as myself as the select board liaison to that. And I also just wanted to make a quick note for everyone here today and on Zoom. Thank you so much. You know, it's really important that we're mindful of what this town really wants for the leadership of our select board, because that very much determines the tone by which you all as residents of our town feel comfortable coming up here and speaking. We want this to be as inclusive as possible, and the leadership of our select board very much determines that. So thank you.
Thank you. Dean or Fran? No? Okay. We'll move on to our first public hearing of this evening. The Select Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, May 23rd, 2022 at 7:10 p.m. on the proposed amendments to the existing traffic rules and orders to add the following street to Article 6, Section 1, one-way streets, River Street from the intersection of School Street to the intersection of Chadwick Street. The designated one-way vehicular traffic on River Street from School Street to Chadwick Street shall be eastbound. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. This is a project that we started last year. We had some meetings with neighbors on River Street. That started because of concerns for pedestrian safety, and we talked about potential need for a sidewalk on that street. And as we were looking at the sidewalk, we determined that there may be a potential safety benefit to actually looking at the way traffic circulates on that street before we add a sidewalk. And so Director Corey York led a project with a consulting team to do some design work to determine the safety of it. And Corey is here with us virtually, if I could bring him in to share the results of that work.
Good evening.
Yes, as John had mentioned, we've been looking at River Street most recently for the addition of a sidewalk. Several years ago, we've been talking with the neighbors. They had some concerns about speeding on River Street and throughout the day. We did some counts and we did see some high speeds that were approaching 50 to 60 miles an hour. There was like a half dozen cars throughout the day. Some of it was racing to catch the train in the morning. Was I think when the police had pulled a couple people over. And there was some late in the day, it was down to the evening rush hour or something like that. So it was something that we were looking into. And then shortly after the park over at the River Street Dam was coming up, so we were kind of watching how that was playing out. And then most recently, as we've been talking about the sidewalk with the neighbors, this had come up again. So we ran a concept design looking at a sidewalk coming down basically the entire length, but this upper section between School Street and the Chadwick Street intersections. Some challenges there with steep slopes, the river on one side, proximity houses to the street. So we kind of floated the idea of taking a little more aggressive look at it. So we had hired a consultant to come out and evaluate sort of the flow through here. So they did an analysis of the roadways, the traffic data, and the intersections. And looking at the sight lines as you're at School and Chadwick, and the sight lines when you're at School and River, looking to your right, the sight line itself is about the same. It was about a little over 200 feet. There's a little bit of an advantage at the School in Chadwick where you kind of lose a little bit where there's a high point, but you can see further down. I think you can see the neighborhood of, I want to say it's like 600 and something feet down. And you kind of lose the vehicle and they go in that valley and come back up. So there was some benefit there. One of the biggest benefits is just the alignment. It allows a vehicle to pull up at more of a 90-degree turn, so you're not really trying to strain over your shoulder to look. And that was something that had played into it. So in doing this analysis, the traffic engineer had recommended doing the one-way. So it would be allowing vehicles to enter from the School Street intersection, driving towards Parker Street, having that as the one-way approach. And then all the westbound traffic that is typically heading towards the School Street intersection now would be diverted onto Chadwick. The Transportation Advisory Committee had met and discussed this, and they unanimously voted in favor of it. We've also distributed to the neighbors that we've gotten email shells from, so we've distributed information for them to look at. And we sent it out to the police and fire to comment. They both had come back with some questions and comments that they both had relative to flow, things like that. The fire departments had raised some concerns about that, but he'd withdrawn those because he didn't see the questions that he had outweighing the benefit of trying this out and doing the one-way and improving that flow. And then when I met with the police and talking about theirs, they had the same agreement. They realized that both of them had kind of the same sightline limitations as you're looking to the right. But in essence, utilizing the Chadwick intersection was more favorable than having vehicles up at the School Street trying to look at that, sort of that reverse Y looking down. So they felt it was the safer option as well. When you compare the two intersections, as part of their recommendation, they also asked, which I agree, is if we were to do this one-way operation, that we would install those portable speed signs they have, put them up as kind of a reminder for people on School Street of the posted speed limit there to help reinforce that as we do this flow. I think when you look at the traffic data itself, when I was looking at the 3-day counts they had, it was about, I think over the course of the entire day, it was, on average, it was like 230 vehicles that head westbound. So that would be potentially the traffic that would be diverted on to Chadwick. When we looked at the peak hours, we're looking in the range of about, I think it was something like 48 cars or so in the peak hour in the morning and like 52 or 53 cars in the evening peak hour. So, I mean, on average, it would be an additional car every minute if you just kind of average it out. But so it wasn't, they didn't see the queuing as being a major issue at this location. And some people may redirect their routes, but it didn't seem to be overly troublesome to do this. So it was recommended. And they did get support from our emergency personnel and Transportation Advisory Committee. So we're here tonight with the amendment to the traffic rules and orders to try this out and do a one-way. That would one of the big benefits of if we do this, in addition to the trying to help out with the speeding issues, what is also improves the viability of building a sidewalk through here. The options that we were looking at was going to involve retaining walls to sort of cut into the slope. And then we did meet with the park designers, so as they're progressing with their designs, they're formulating one of the walkways that's near River Street that would sort of do a shared purpose where the sidewalk would tie into it. So as you're walking up, you can kind of meander in the park, and they have a one way that would come up through this, so we would tie into that. Plus, we also keep away. There's at least a couple houses that are very close where we were looking at. We were going to have to do some work, so there were some concerns there about walls in front of their houses, or even just impacts. We were working pretty close to their foundation. So if the one way was to happen, it does make the sidewalk design a much better approach to that. And one thing that I've heard over the years, as the rail trails are coming in, I've heard discussions of this being another possible route. I guess there's a good amount of bike traffic that's already on this. So if we did a one-way, we are looking at, like I said, the sidewalks, but also having a contraflow lane for bikes, which would be similar to what we have on Maple Street, sort of on the one-way stretch between Main Street and Stowe Street where the train tracks are. So it gives sort of an organized way for bikes that are coming the opposite direction, the ability to sort of be there. As drivers and pedestrians, it kind of organizes. You kind of know where people are. So we're here tonight to ask the board if they're willing to approve this and make this stretch one way, sort of heading eastbound between School Street and the Chadwick Street intersections for River Street. Thank you.
Thank you. So members of the board have questions for Director York? Fran.
And I don't know if this is too early in the plan. Do you know what side of the street the sidewalk would be put?
Yeah, our original concept that we had put out there for this stretch, we were looking at the sort of the School Street side, and mostly because of complications with when you look at the Fort Pond Brook side, it just drops right off into the floodplain. Mm-hmm. So we were looking on that side, but it has, like I said, the implications with the homes and the structures. With the one-way stretch, it gives us more room to play. So, and with the poles there, we believe if we have the one-way, we would be able to run the sidewalk all the way down the river side, the Fort Pond Brook side, mm-hmm. and then tie right into the park there, because we would be able to sort of stay on the guardrail, along the guardrail there. So it would give it more of a continuous sidewalk along that stretch, all the way down past probably most of the street going down that way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dean.
So, considering that we will be diverting some additional traffic onto Chadwick Street, I wonder if you've thought at all about investigating the need for a sidewalk on Chadwick Street that might help out. Just a suggestion. The other observation I've got is that, certainly turning something into a one-way street in the short term seems very inconvenient and insurmountable. But I remember years ago when Coughlin Street got made one-way. It took a while for people to get used to it. Once it gets imprinted, it works out pretty well. So I think this could be a really positive improvement. But I would like to hear a reaction about Chadwick Street sidewalk.
Yeah, we did as part of, when we did the survey for River Street, we had thought about that, so we had added on. So we do have a survey of Chadwick, and we're planning to extend the sidewalk up to make a connection over to school on that. So it is part of that process.
Thank you. Other questions from board members? I have two. Corey, where the foliage is on the end of Chadwick Street at school looking right, is it possible to trim that back to improve the sight lines?
Yeah, we've been working with the tree crew. They've been coming out, last year they were pruning back sort of at the Chadwick at the River Street side. I did notice there was some bushes that were not just the tree that was sort of overhanging, blocking the stop sign a little bit, but there was also a bush kind of encroaching out, blocking the sight line. So we'll be working with the neighbors there and the tree crew about just pruning that back to improve that. So.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, if it was necessary in the future, what's your reaction to the possibility of a three-way stop at Chadwick and school? One of the things that I've heard complaints from some residents, that where you pass Chadwick there, you're heading, if you're going westbound, you're heading into the S-curves of School Street, and I've heard some concerns about people continuing quite fast through those S-curves. And so I'm just wondering what your reaction is to the stop sign, and there'll be a future thing, obviously.
Yeah, we recently did High and Parker. We've gone through some multi-way stop analysis. It's something like, say, down the road we could look into. Working with the police, we're going to put up those flashing signs to reinforce, just reminding drivers about the speed, do some added enforcement there to kind of try to get that under control depending on what they see for speeds. Good thing is these traffic counts, if we pick up on a pattern of speeding, the police can target their enforcement to try to go after somebody who's just driving at a really high rate of speed. So we do use that information to try to target some of that enforcement to grab some of those situations as well.
Thank you. Now, Hamja.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I have two quick questions. So you touched upon this, but can you go into more detail on the changing of signage? And then the second question is, with this change, would there be like any construction, like any trees that would need to be cut for this?
As far as for the one-way, if we opted for a one-way flow and then that gives room for the sidewalks, I don't believe there would be any tree removals because we should be able to work pretty much within the confines of the existing limits of pavement. If we had to, if the two-way flow remained and we had to excavate into the shoulder to build a sidewalk, there would be tree removals. They're going around poles and those slopes. There are trees along sort of the tops of the slopes. So there are trees that would be impacting the roots that we have to take down. The one benefit here as well is one of the things when we had the sidewalk shifting sides, there was some large trees up by School Street that looked fairly healthy. So we were trying to avoid removals of those. If we go to one way, I think what we'd be able to do is narrow up the roadway a bit, keep it in the pavement so we wouldn't have to impact those trees, and it would allow us to stay on that same side. So I think the one-way approach and the sidewalk did be a lot less environmental impacts as far as tree removals, things like that.
Thank you. So I don't see any more questions, so I'll take comments from the public now.
Hi, Franny Osmond, Half Moon Hill. I'm the chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee, and so thank you, Corey, for mentioning the fact that we did discuss this and we supported it unanimously. But I wanted to point out to the neighbors who had concerns about traffic piling up that we did look at the report that they had done, and it looked like it was, like changing from 1 to 2 cars at a time, waiting, whatever it was not concerning, the amount that was backing up. Corey, can you confirm that?
Yeah, like we were talking about the westbound traffic for River Street. It's about 230 cars per day, but at the heaviest times, being in the AM peak hour and the evening rush hour, we were looking around, say, 48 to 53 cars was in that rush hour. So, I mean, just averaging that up over the course, I mean, you're looking at a little over a minute per car coming through there. So it wasn't even the queuing that when they ran it through their system, looking at the traffic data. It was very minimal increases in queuing. It was adding a car or two. It might be added to it. And the delay as you're trying to make that intersection was only a few seconds. So it was a very minor increases from what all the study is showing.
Okay, I mean, I suppose if you live there, we can't ask everybody to spread out exactly evenly over a whole hour. So I suppose if you did live there, you would see more, as the people up at the corner of River Street see now. I also wanted to point out that the Commission on Disability was also hearing about the park and some of the sidewalk advantages of doing this, of getting the sidewalk there. And so, wow, it's loud. Is it echoing for everybody? Maybe I'll stand back. I think this is really important. We should always be putting pedestrians before cars, and I believe that this is me talking now, that it is a good decision. And it also can help with the connections between Aspet River Rail Trail and the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail that we might be able to get to go through the W.R. Grace property. And this gets us that much closer to good connectivity between South Acton and West Concord. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Daniel Gilfix, Vanderbilt Road in historic South Acton. I just want to remind you all that the objective here was not to have a one-way street. The objective was to improve safety, and the way we're going to do that is to install sidewalks. And you guys are introducing one-way street in order to facilitate sidewalks. Great, I'm up for it. I think it adds some inconvenience to some people, but that's the best solution. However, I implore you not to just think of that alone, because as others might have mentioned, you make a road one way, people are going to be driving even faster than they're driving right now. And I've been an advocate not only of sidewalks, but of lowering the speed limit on River Street for decades now. And it just makes no sense that a much wider road, School Street, that has sidewalks and a double yellow line is at 25 miles an hour, and narrow River Street, which has no sidewalks and no line, is at 30. And if you're going to make this one way, people are going to go even faster. So please, you don't need a commission study. We don't need to spend any more money. It's just obvious that that road has to go slower. And the other request I have is that please don't focus merely on the sidewalks between Chadwick and School. It's the entire road that needs to be done. And if we speak about what's easy to do, from Chadwick to Parker, it's so open. Really, you could take care of that in half the amount of time it's going to take to do the other end. So perhaps you can get started on that, then make this, one way, and then do the others, or do it all at the same time. But please focus on the biggest goal, which is safety, consumer safety.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Only if you want to be heard.
I'm Sam Williams, 14 Chadwick Street for 29 years. I got this piece of paper in my mailbox on Friday, and here we are Monday. I hope you don't expect to make a decision after 3 days on a decision that could affect a lot of neighbors. And we've heard that neighbors have input. I didn't know about this until Friday when I received this 3-sentence statement. There was no explanation for the rationale. I was left to speculate as to the rationale. I can think of one or two reasons, none of which Mr. York mentioned, but I would ask that Mr. York's statements be transcribed, because it was very difficult to understand everything that he was saying. I think he made some good points, a lot of which I couldn't hear because of just the echoes and the noise. So I hope that you will not make a decision on this tonight without satisfactory input. The explanation I did hear is that cars are driving 60 miles an hour westbound to make it to the train. Well, if you make River Street one-way eastbound, you do realize it's downhill eastbound. You think they're going to drive any more slowly? Like the earlier guy said, they're going to drive just as fast. I mean, maybe consider some speed bumps if that's the issue. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cheryl, and I live right in between River Street and School Street. I'm the second house in from the fork. Corey, can you just clarify one thing for me? Did you say that the purpose of the one-way road is to make space for the sidewalk without having environmental impact? Was that the main reason of making it one-way?
No, the one-way concept came up several years ago in working with the neighbors. They had some concerns. They were witnessing high speeds heading towards School Street. So it came up as a discussion then, because the high speeds were all heading towards School Street. The traffic that was heading eastbound, I think the 85th percentile speed was registering in at like 32 miles an hour at the time. With a few coming up higher than that, but so it was looking at it from a sort of a traffic speeding issue. It came back to light when we started looking at the sidewalk along the entire stretch of River Street. We were talking with the neighbors about traffic issues, so it lent itself that we want to take a closer look where we're trying to put sidewalks along the entire length and looking at sort of the speeding issue in this upper section. So it was kind of a dual thing that we were looking into.
Okay, I want to clarify that the speeding happens both directions, and specifically coming off of School Street onto River. I live the second house in. We have 4 children. I have 2 myself. There's a 2-year-old toddler on the corner there and a 5th grader across the street. The cars coming off School Street onto River Street are pushing 40, 50 miles an hour taking that turn. And then there's a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit sign, and they're going 50, 60. So my suggestion is, if this is going to go forward with putting River Street as a one-way street with sidewalks, is going to be a green light for people to go even faster around that corner, because they're anticipating no oncoming traffic. But there is a plethora of children right there in that little neighborhood, bikers, pedestrians with no sidewalks currently. Obviously, that's what you're working on. But there needs to be implemented a drastic reduction in speed before the corner. So signs that clearly state taking that corner, people need to slow down. 15 miles per hour, that's my suggestion. Speed bumps, which was already suggested, absolutely, because it's a straightaway, it's a racetrack for people. And my kids running across the street to play with their neighbor is like I'm white-knuckled. So making this a one-way street from that point on is just like terrifying to me. I'm not opposed to it. Granted, I will have to do the big loop around Chadwick and School Street to get to 27. That's not the biggest deal. What's the big deal to me is the people that will be taking that turn much faster than they already do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Stephanie Krantz. I am at 79 River Street, which happens to be the house with the driveway that hits that. I'm essentially the 4-way stop there, and that's what I would like to suggest. I think everyone here realizes that it's going to turn into a raceway coming down off of School Street, downriver. It already is, but I think that what's going to happen, it's going to be similar to what happened up at High Street. If you remember, they just put that 4-way in not too long ago because of all of the accidents happening there. Nobody stops when they're coming down Chadwick as it is right now. So when I'm pulling out of my driveway even now, I'm watching high-speed cars coming both directions and people who don't stop coming down Chadwick. So if it's a free-for-all with 3 people, or with that coming this way and them coming down River, I don't know that I stand a chance to make it across with the people who don't stop to turn and the speed. My next concern is if you don't do anything there, we have, there's several new homes that are in that River Street area there. We all have kids. We all have neighbors who play. They're running on those sidewalks. I think with the speed and the risk of accidents, those cars are not going to stay on the road. They're going to end up in yards. They're going to end up on sidewalks. It's already happened even at low speeds. Another concern. What were some of the other? You'll talk more about things. That's all I have. And I'm for it. I am for it. I also serve on the 53 River Street Committee. This is something we've been working on a long time. We want to see something change. It's just to what detriment and what. I just want to make sure that we're covering all the bases. We're looking at it from all points of view. And the biggest thing is going to be the speed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather Sheehan, 81 River Street. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic and hopeful about the one-way solution. I definitely have some concerns as well in what previous neighbors have spoken about regarding the speed, because I think one kind of traffic calming measure that is happening on River Street already is when cars are heading in opposite directions, there isn't much room, so you have to slow down to make way for one another. So I worry about pulling on a one-way street, having plenty of space and cars just flying down that road. My other concern is the sidewalk, the proposed new sidewalk location. So we have a sidewalk in front of several of our homes on River Street. And if we need to cross the street to get onto a sidewalk, I can only imagine where that would happen, right around where our mailboxes are, and it's very difficult to see because I walk it every day with my daughter in a stroller, and I have to hold the stroller back and stick my head out quite far to see that no cars are coming. So I'm really concerned about making that cross when we're trying to increase safety. It seems like that's kind of counterproductive. And lastly is what Steph just talked about. Cars flying down River Street towards School Street, if they need to make that quick right onto Chadwick. It's going to be a very quick right, so I'm really concerned about traffic slowing measures leading up to that turn, perhaps a stop sign, as well as cars coming down the new one-way. Well, now they're facing oncoming traffic. And what will be done to alert them that they need to now share the road and slow down. So really a stop sign for all 3 seems like the safest solution. Thank you.
Can I ask you just a clarifying question? Where you said you had to lean out to see, is that crossing at your house at 81 River?
So no, 81, my mailbox is down at the end near 69 River. So when we go, just walk down there, get mail, want to keep walking down River, we have to cross to get on the other side of the street, and it's terrifying to cross there because of the foliage and just there's a turn right there. So cars kind of whip around pretty quickly at that spot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kendra Wilson, also live on River Street, and thanks for your work on this. Corey, you too. Definitely in favor of making this into a one-way as you proposed, and echo a lot of the comments that have been said already tonight. Just to pick up on Heather's point is there is sort of a blind corner right there on River Street. I'm at 69 and it's right where our mailboxes are. We have about 20 kids between my house and probably 8 houses down that are 12 and under, and it's terrifying with our children out and about. So would hope that you strongly consider keeping the sidewalk that's already, keeping it on that south side of River Street, all the way up to School Street, where there is a sidewalk today right there. I think it would impact a lot less homes. Some of those homes with the foundation issues, we wouldn't have to deal with that. It would probably move a little quicker. So that's one thing. And to Daniel's point, keeping the sidewalk going all the way to Parker, because that would keep people, especially young children, on one side of the street and not in the road where we're really worried about the speed. Again, hoping to keep the speeds at a lower miles per hour to help with that, and then implementing crosswalks. So I love the idea of having a sidewalk on Chadwick to connect with the sidewalk on School Street, and then down to River, so kind of crosswalks all there, because right now I often cross from school onto Chadwick, and it's sort of like, you know, you got to be ready to go because it's a blind, kind of heading westbound on School Street. There's a hill and you can't really see, so you got to move quick. And then also the stop signs, I think we have to mirror what we did on High Street for safety, to have stop signs on all sides on River. And then I'd love to know, in terms of timeline for this, what does this look like for approvals, next steps? I have no clue. So I'd love to hear that from you guys too. Thank you.
So just to answer your question, that the one-way decision could be made very, very quickly, right? So, because there's not much to prepare. It's not like building a sidewalk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Jane Roberts. I live at 57 Parker Street, and I'm asking the Select Board to not make this change at this time. I don't think there has been enough notice of this change, perhaps for the people who live right there near the intersection of Chadwick and River Street, but for people who live a little bit beyond that, this was news to us. I didn't hear about this until last week. I think there are a lot of moving pieces still. We've talked about the park on River Street. There's still a proposal to remove the dam at 53 River Street. There's a South Acton Main Street corridor traffic study that's been proposed. I think we should wait until some of these pieces have stopped moving and we have a better idea of what might be going on in the slightly larger neighborhood. I think maybe there are some short-term, easy things that I've heard other people mention. Putting a three-way stop at the intersection of River Street and Chadwick Street sounds like a really great idea. Changing the speed limit to 25 miles an hour, I think, sounds like a great idea. I know it's not ideal for the people who live right there, but there are sidewalks already on School Street between River Street and Chadwick. So that is somewhat of an option for people, as opposed to the other end of River Street between Chadwick and Parker Street, and in particular between Merriam Lane and Carriage Hill Drive. There's a hill, and I can't imagine how nobody has died there yet because it's so dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists. If the change is eventually made, I think it's important to think about the impact on other surrounding streets. So we've talked about the impact on Chadwick and the challenges with the sight lines. At the intersection of Chadwick and School Street, there are no great sight lines. If cars start using Parker Street instead, that's also a very dangerous road between River Street and School Street due to the curves and the narrow road, and again, the excessive speeds that people drive. If people choose to take High Street instead, we already know about the issues with the intersection of High Street and Main Street. So I don't think we want any more traffic going that way either. And finally, it's kind of a challenge living in South Acton. We're kind of isolated. We're cut off by Route 2, we're cut off by the railroad tracks, we're cut off by Main Street. And so, well, I don't want to be car-centric. The reality is people do drive places. We don't have grocery stores that we can easily walk to. So one potential problem if we make that section of River Street run-way, when School Street gets closed between River Street and Chadwick Street, as sometimes happens for road work or when trees come down, people have to drive really far out of their way. So thank you for your consideration. And again, I hope there's more opportunities for people to provide input on this before a final decision is made. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, David Hahn, 105 School Street. My property fronts on both School Street and River Street. and I have an office in the back of my house that looks out on River Street, so I see this street all day, every day. Compared to School Street, River Street has virtually no traffic. There's some at peak times, but if you look at the figures in that report, and I just want to say that there is a full traffic report that Corey has been quoting from for the person who was up here who said he wanted more information. There's a complete report up about this one-way study. So I urge the selectmen to get that person that report. I won't repeat the arguments. Obviously, there's a sidewalk on the south side, which is the river side of River Street, that starts in front of the new houses by Chadwick, and it picks up again at the other end of School Street. So, and we're doing a park, so it's logical that the sidewalk belongs on the south side. On the north side, just speaking for the Historic District Commission concerns, there's two houses where it's impossible to get a sidewalk through in front of those houses without the sidewalk being literally that far from people's front door. So I think it's just logical that it belongs on the south side. In terms of safety concerns, I'm for a stop sign at Chadwick and School Street. There are dangerous S-curves down School Street. I've lived here for 15 years. I had a beautiful fence in front of my house. It's gotten hit 9 times. Serious accidents, 911 calls. So that would be great if you could slow the traffic there. And in terms of a backup there, someone had a question about that. In the report, I believe it says it's 14 feet. They measure it in feet. So it'd go from 20 feet to 34 feet, which is less than a car. So that, I don't think is a concern. I do have a suggestion for the other end of River Street where it connects to School Street. The reason why people, of course, speed through there is because it's an acute angle. You don't have to slow down to make a turn. And I think there's enough real estate there, Corey, to, as you come by the church heading eastbound, to make that end of School Street more of a right angle intersection with between River and School. I think you can sweep the sidewalk out and make it, so people really have to slow down before they turn onto River Street. Perhaps that will alleviate some concerns. Lastly, I'll say that it's an extremely popular route, not for cars, but for pedestrians, bikers, runners, walkers, strollers, especially bikers. We get huge packs of bikers all the time coming down, and they're almost always heading eastbound down River Street. So I'm 100% for this, and I hope you pass it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ruggiero, and I live at 6 Chadwick Street. And for many of the reasons that have already been mentioned, the concerns about speed, concerns about sightlines, all of those things, I could just echo what so many people said. However, I end up feeling like I don't want this to happen. And I would say one of my biggest concerns, other than all of those things, is I don't think it makes sense to have traffic directed so that you're making a left turn from Chadwick onto School Street. I walk almost daily in our neighborhood. I also drive my car, and there's not a comparison between turning left from Chadwick onto School with turning left from Chadwick onto River. They're both a little hairy, I will admit that. But turning onto School Street, to the left is where that S-curve is he was just referring to, and people come whipping around there. So first of all, you have to get your car out beyond where the white line is in order to even be able to see both ways on School Street. And then once you're out there and you look both ways, it's hard to see to the right because of foliage, and there's a hill. Cars are coming up over a hill. So they're speeding up over the hill on the right, and they're speeding around the curve on the left. And you're sitting out there halfway in the road because that's the only way you can see, and then you try to make it. And I can't tell you the number of times, either, again, walking or driving, that I've been partway out and had to stop all of a sudden because somebody comes whipping around. Whereas at the other end, when you're turning from Chadwick Street onto River,
yes, it's true that many people do not stop there, but also you do have clearer sight lines to the right and the left. It's a little straighter at that point, so it's easier to see. So that's one of my biggest reasons where I do not think this makes sense to make the traffic, divert the traffic through Chadwick and left onto School Street. And I personally, some people here are more generous than I, but I would not be happy if I lived on the upper part of River and had to go across Chadwick, then up School, then try to make a left from School onto River. That's not going to be an easy task either. So at any rate, that's my thing. I'm not in favor of this idea. I do think we shouldn't forget the idea of sidewalks, which is sort of how a lot of this started. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, James Conboy, 120 Parker Street. 25 years there. Of course, I use River Street a lot. And I can sympathize with the people who have seen cars zipping along there. Today I went through and there were small children out there, the weather being nice and all. So I'm kind of sitting on the fence as to whether it should be one way or not. I just heard about this tonight since I'm not in a butter. But one option might be what I've seen in downtown Maynard and several rural streets in Wayland, which is a speed bump. Temporary, which I think they have in Maynard, or permanent, which they have laid down in Wayland. Certainly one in the Chadwick Road area, which is where a lot of those houses are, next to the street, children on tricycles, bicycles, etc. And maybe to address the people who live on the corner of School and River Street, one near there, maybe, with appropriate warning signs like I see in those towns, speed bump or speed hump coming up, so slow down. So it might be worth a try. As far as the one way, it wouldn't inconvenience me a lot, but I can feel for the people on Chadwick Street getting more cars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa Nickel, School Street, 76. Can I ask a clarifying question of something that Corey presented? Corey, did you say that there was consideration for a contra bike lanes on that section of River Street so that bikes would be coming against the one-way flow westbound?
That's correct, yeah, similar to what we had on Maple Street by the train station.
Okay, so I think that this is a rational decision to make the road one way from School Street to Chadwick and keep the sidewalk on the south side, on the river side, so that people don't have to cross over to the north side to continue on the sidewalk and to avoid all of the issues with the cost of retaining walls and the issues with getting too close to the historic homes on River Street. So I'm fully in support of it. I do hear that people are concerned that having it one way is going to cause cars to go even faster. So I agree with what David Hahn said about widening the sidewalk there. Because I'm not a traffic engineer, but I've heard enough of them say that when the street is narrowed, that the visual narrowing of the street slows cars down. So I think we need to make the sidewalk as wide as possible. And my neighbor Peter Lukasik says that it's called a tree lawn. So between the street and the sidewalk, a wide swath of grass. And that will keep pedestrians that are on the sidewalk even safer. So I know there are rules about how wide a road needs to be, but let's make it, the minimum that is required. I firmly support changing River Street to 25 miles an hour. So I live on School Street, which is 25 miles an hour. It also makes no sense to me that that road is 30 miles per hour on River. I don't drive on that section of River. I always, when I'm coming from like Powder Mill, Parker, I will take a right-hand turn on Chadwick and then a left on School Street.
I walk there a lot, though, and so I think it makes a lot of sense to lower that speed limit. In terms of fixing the intersection to help the additional flow of traffic that's going to be coming down Chadwick to get to School Street, I don't know what the traffic engineers are going to recommend, whether a three-way stop. Bettina promises that she's going to get her pruning shears out and take care of the foliage there. But I think another piece that can be looked at is to grade that vertical curve so that you can see further down. And it's a scenic road and it would require another public hearing, but I think that that's a good thing to look at. I am absolutely not in favor of a contra bike lane because I walk there and I know that the folks that are here tonight walk and run and bike there, and I haven't heard anything positive about the contra bike lane on Maple coming up to Main Street. It seems to me that it's an accident waiting to happen because you're not expecting bicycles to be coming the wrong way on a one-way street. You're expecting bicycles to follow the rules of the road. So especially for the young children and the pedestrians and the runners, I think it would be immensely reckless to have a contra bike lane there. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob Hamilton. I live at 62 River Street, which is in the section that would be considered. First, I just want to add to what she just said about bicycles and contra bike lane. One of the things that I've noticed is that when we get the large number of bicycles, usually on a weekend, they don't use bike lanes at all. They're operating in a pack. So we shouldn't think about building a bike lane for them. If we build a bike lane, it should be for the occasional commuter or child. So I'm cautiously in favor of turning the section of River Street into one way, but I'm wondering whether it's possible to do it on a trial basis for perhaps a year, and then reevaluate the pros and cons after. There are quite a few things that I regard as cons. It would definitely affect my driving pattern every day, going to work and so forth. The other thing to consider, as others have said, are traffic calming mechanisms such as speed bumps or a slight redesign at the entrance of River Street from School Street. I know that the fire department will not want that intersection restricted. It's a pretty small intersection, but whatever can be done to try to slow the traffic would be the real enhancement to safety. So that's all to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Kim Hocknell. I'm at 122 School Street, right at the corner of School Street and Chadwick. First of all, I want to thank everyone for all their hard work on this project that you've done to date, but before we approve this and hearing what everyone else is saying, I do think there's a lot of more thought to be put in around the safety aspects of this. I know you did your traffic study, which showed the, minimal, I use that word very lightly, impact in the traffic going up Chadwick Street, but the people that live there and the people that drive there every day are the ones that experience what's really going on there. And what I hear is people screeching out of Chadwick trying to get in front of the person flying down School Street. I hear the horns blowing, and the increase in that traffic and the risk around that really makes me nervous for the people in that area and those people driving in that area and the kids playing around that area. So I do think before this is approved, we really need to make sure that safety measures are put in place before anything changes. I know you had mentioned that it'll be approved quick because all it is changing the road. I think there's a lot more work to be done before this gets approved and that we make sure that our community is safe when it's done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Bettina Abe, corner of Chadwick and School, and the offensive, very long-leafed linden tree, which I will prune as soon as possible. Sorry about that, guys. It's really nice to see all my Southie neighbors here. It's like we should have a block party really soon. It's also really wonderful to have the Focus. We've lived there for 26 years. We hear all the screeching. And there's been some great comments, great suggestions, and I'm very, very grateful that you're thinking of doing this, because people say they haven't heard about it, but really we've been talking about it ever since I moved here. And with the new park, making River one-way is just going to solve a lot of problems. The traffic study was excellent and shows there would be a minimal increase of people on Chadwick. I live right there, so I hear all the things that my neighbors have been saying, and I really thank you, and I hope you go forward with it, because it'll be extremely wonderful to have a sidewalk on River. And my only other comment is, please consider sidewalking Chadwick as well, because if we are going to divert more cars onto Chadwick, just for pedestrian safety as well, it would be great to have that little itty bitty segment sidewalk too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I don't live on those roads, but I travel them daily for work, in which I'm only given a short time to commute between clients. I do see cyclists flying down there with no regard to their having to go by traffic laws, and just like cars do, but I also realize that the intersection of Parker to River are totally blind, and once people come to that point, they are flying down there because they're so fed up of having to wait and pull out, nearly get hit themselves. But I do think that road, not just at that tipping point, but the entire thing should be one way. Because when I'm headed either towards Littleton or towards the other direction, I am coming across cars not stopping even on School Street at that point. So whichever way you make that one way, there are still people going to get hurt unless you enforce the laws of the road at every epicenter of that road, Chadwick, Parker, and School. And especially those cyclists. I've never lived in an area so dangerous with cyclists, and I came from the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a very brief request. Next time we talk about changing...
Charlie, could you just tell everybody who you are? I know who you are, but could you tell everybody who you are?
I'm Charlie Chadwick, Paul Revere Road. For those of you who don't know that. Anyway, my brief request is next time we talk about changing directions, sidewalks, and so forth, could we have a map?
Hi, I'm Tara from West Acton. Nowhere near here, but I have friends in the area and I travel there quite often. And before I give my comments, I'd just like one question answered. Did the town send out abutters notices so that people got a mailing that this was going on? Yes. Okay, thank you. So I agree with the concept of the speedway, and the 15 miles an hour is a great idea. I was shocked when a friend moved into Quail Ridge and I had to travel 15 miles an hour, and I thought for sure it was at least a year until I made it down the thing, and it isn't. It's a half a minute, a minute. It's worth the safety. I agree with David on the 90-degree River Street thing. I think we can do that now, I hope. The speed limit, we can do that now. Three-way stops, we can do that now. Sidewalks all the way down, great idea. Sidewalks up Chadwick, I think we should have developer fees for sidewalks when they are on the corner, given that they're making millions of dollars. I hope that the sidewalk down River is meandering, so it's not right up against where people are speeding, because they will still speed. Please, like we did along Main Street, we made that meandering, and I think we should do that again. The sidewalk, I think, should be on the river side of River Street. If it isn't, then not only are you crunching a sidewalk up until Kathy's house, it would ruin her native garden, which is beautiful, and all those old trees, but more importantly, perhaps, all the people would have to cross River Street to get to the sidewalk. So that, I think, is not good. I urge people to take caution on speed bumps. I know somebody that lobbied for like 10 years to get a speed bump outside her house, only to hear ta-tunk, 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 ta-tunk all night long. So raised crosswalks might be a better idea. Love the idea of a road diet. Anything you can do to narrow these roads. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, and I'm afraid of the contra bike lane thing for the same reasons already stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, could you call on the online people, please?
First up is Heather Morton.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Morton. I'm at 1 River Street, so I actually live at exactly the place where people are racing past, going down what I now understand would be the direction of one-way road. I've never received any information about any of this, right? I haven't seen the traffic report. I didn't know there was a presentation. So my first comment is just I really would have appreciated knowing that these discussions were happening and having some information, and I would love to get a copy of the traffic report. I'm in a position right now where every time I go down River Street, I have to stop because my parking spots are right there. So as people are speeding by, there's 2 bump out parking spots that are on the right-hand side of River Street. So often my housemate has already parked and I need to actually stop and pull in backwards to get into my parking spot. And I have people racing down. I've almost been hit a couple times. So, I think it's fantastic that we're talking about how to slow people down. I think that's a great idea. Right now, just instinctively, of course, I'm very against the idea of making it one way. It does mean that myself, my housemate, and my tenants would all be using Chadwick Street, which we rarely do, right? So you're sending a lot more people, residents who live at the beginning, right at the very top of River Street, you're sending us all the way down to Chadwick. When I want to say get to Gates, right? I want to get to Gates, West Acton to drop my daughter off or pick her up. I understand that might be considered trivial, right? But it's going to be pretty significantly inconvenient. So because I didn't know anything about this, I would love it for it to be temporary or to be able to read the traffic study. I'm still not entirely sure what this is a problem solving. It sounds like we're trying to get a sidewalk, which I support, that's great, but somehow getting a sidewalk involves turning the whole street into one way. It seems to me that most of the people who've spoken so far have been concerned about the amount of traffic and the speed at the traffic is going, and I agree with that. Both the bikers and the people racing down River Street, they're going really fast. I want to see the traffic report. I want to understand better how making it one way is going to automatically slow down the traffic. So I'm still, I'm wrapping my mind around this, right? As we're talking about taking me about I don't know, what would it be, 1/10 to 1/15 of a mile out of my way every time I try to get home or leave home. So I understand I'm just speaking, my personal concerns, this is one family, well, 3 families, but, and there's a larger good here, but I do think that larger good could have been communicated to the neighbors. I get stuff all the time from the historical district that OH manages to find its way into my mailbox, and, again, I heard about this through Miriam Maxwell's senior citizen newsletter that goes out. That's the only reason I knew that this conversation was taking place this evening. So I would appreciate it if it could be temporary, or if you could vote on this at a future meeting, just to give those of us who didn't know anything about it and are going to be pretty seriously impacted a little longer to wrap our minds around it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up is Gabriel Breton.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. I actually live at 39 School Street, across the street from Heather, so right at the Y of School Street and River Street. I want to kind of echo some of those sentiments that Cheryl and Heather have raised. I think most families along River Street have children, and the speeds going down River Street, I've been working from home for over 2 years, so I see it daily, and while that turn is really difficult going off River Street to School Street, the traffic oncoming to River Street is, it's just ridiculous. I think, we've done the quick math, and this adds about 20 hours per year for my husband and I for our commute to have to reroute, which definitely is an inconvenience. But I think the thing that we're all hearing as well is that this is more of a safety concern and not a traffic concern. So the speed limit there is kind of unjust for what the needs are in that area. So I would like to see a speed limit change, especially knowing that there's going to be a park coming in there. That's going to increase the traffic flow once that is there. And I haven't heard anything regarding what the future of that will look like. So at this point, I would say we are against this until we have more information and all neighbors' considerations are taken into effect here. So thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to hearing more on this.
Thank you.
And next is Peter Breton.
Well, my wife just went ahead of me, so I would like to echo what she said, and it just seems like there are other options to achieve the same thing without impacting those of us at the head of River Street. As people have mentioned, raised sidewalks and changed speed limit. And since my wife already echoed what we talked about, I'm going to give you your time back. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody for your input. Comments from members of the board? Dean.
Well, I certainly think that whether it's a deliberate act we take tonight or whether it's just the way things happen, I think we have to consider this to be a temporary sort of a trial run. I think it's worthwhile attempting it. And I think considering the backlog of sidewalks we've got out there anyway, I don't think Corey's going to be building new sidewalk on River Street the next year or so anyway, so it might give us a chance to test this out as a traffic measure, the one way, and plan on revisiting it before he does any physical changes down there other than putting up the signs.
Thank you. Imogen?
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions for Corey. The first question is, based on the feedback you've gotten today, do you think that there might be any changes to the current plan that you're envisioning? And then the second question is, if we were to decide on doing a trial run, is that even feasible from where you stand?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to approve this, we could always revisit it a year from now or 6 months from now. This is something when we implement, I work with the police to establish sort of the next steps and how we're gonna roll it out, publicize it with message boards or whatever. So we try to work with them as far as just getting enough signage or something up there so it educates the drivers. So it'll be a change, similar to when we did Parker and High. We try to get the signs out, the markings, and message boards just to try to really reinforce what we were doing. It worked well there, so but hopefully try to do something similar to try to pre-warn drivers as they're coming through here. There's a sort of a changing pattern.
Did you have another question? No? Anybody else?
Corey, you've heard a lot of comments here. I wonder if you had any particular responses or reactions to any of them.
Yeah, no, as John had said, we did a neighborhood meeting, I don't know if it was a year ago, but we met with them. We've gotten a lot of emails over the let's say, last several years related to the sidewalk design itself, trying to see what we can do to move it forward. So this has been sort of an ongoing dialogue with the neighbors, so I would look forward to that continuing. So as we implement some of these changes, we get their feedback, because they live and breathe this day in, day out. So they're kind of the best experts of what's happening out there.
Corey, what do you think about narrowing down the entrance to School Street, possibly, shifting it to the left a little bit as you enter it, and making it more of a right turn? And if you thought that was a good idea, would that happen concurrent with installation of sidewalks, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, we have to look at how we would roll it out with the phasing, because with the one-way stretch, that would allow us to run the sidewalk down the Fort Pondbrook side. So we were already looking at some kind of a narrowing there, because we sort of stay away from those larger trees that are right up there. And we could look at, as David Hahn had mentioned, making that a little bit more of a 90 degrees. So I think that would help right now versus where it is a fairly easy right to make without slowing down. So that would help us to sort of reduce those speeds as you're turning on. We'd have to look at how we implement that now without the sidewalk going on, but I'm sure we can find a way to do that. So.
Or would it be possible to temporarily put in a temporary speed bump? I really don't like speed bumps because someone mentioned that they're noisy, and I think people don't like the noise after a while, or maybe they don't like it in the beginning. But until we had a chance to narrow down the neck of the street or put in the sidewalks there, is a temporary speed bump a possibility?
We could look into that. I do know, start getting into speed bumps. I know the fire typically has concerns because now they're going to be driving over them as they're responding, or an ambulance. There are new styles out there that are segmented so that so for the emergency vehicles having a wider wheelbase, they can drive sort of in between the humps rather than just having one continuous one. So it's something we could look into and see what might work and might not cause a detriment to the emergency personnel.
Or any permanent or temporary traffic calming measure there. And I also have to say that, and we've heard a few comments tonight, I think it's definitely worth investigating the three-way stop at Chadwick and School. Even before the comments tonight, I've heard people express concerns about the entrance to the S-curves westbound on School Street, and people continuing a pretty fast speed through there. So I think that's worthwhile. We heard a few people tonight. I've never been there when there have been this, screeching of tires and things like that, but I've certainly seen that the people go through there fast. Jim.
So when I think about safety there, and I think about speed limits, one thing I've learned in our traffic time together is that putting a sign up isn't what slows traffic down. It's the condition of the road, or the appearance of the condition of the road for the drivers. Does it feel like a place where I need to drive slowly? So to me, the big win is when the road can become narrow. So that, I'm okay either making this decision tonight or at a future meeting, but I don't think we should make it temporary. Because temporary means that we can't do the work to actually narrow it. And we can't reliably plan a sidewalk, because if we undo it, the sidewalk suddenly doesn't have a place to go. So I would rather, either tonight or at a future meeting after more community input, just make the decision and make it permanent, as permanent as decisions are, so we can go ahead with actually changing the conditions of the road, making it narrow, adding sidewalks. That's the big win for me, is when we get to the real place of safety there. It's a really difficult place to live and feel safe, so I don't think there's any ideal solution that's going to make everyone happy. But this does seem like, for the most people, the best way of creating safety is to neck that thing down and get a sidewalk.
Thank you. I completely agree that it's very difficult to make this a temporary solution. If we did make it temporary, we would have to hold off any work on sidewalks until we decided that it wasn't temporary any longer. And I just wanted, because several people asked, and I've attended the community meetings, all the sidewalk meetings, read all the sidewalk designs and this design. The problem for this to get everything through that section is if we didn't make it one way there, then the sidewalk has to be on the house side of School Street or not the river side. And it is, because of the nature of the houses there, it is really, really close to some houses. And in fact, there are one or two places where there couldn't be a sidewalk. There'd actually be a gap because the house is in the way. And so there's just not enough room for a two-way street and a sidewalk. And so people would have to walk out in the traffic lane because we couldn't fit a sidewalk there. The advantage to making this one way in addition that the sidewalk fits is that this, and several people have mentioned this tonight, is that sidewalk can be contiguous, all on the south side or river side of the street for the full extent, which means that someone using the sidewalk doesn't have to cross the street over and back. So what's the sense of the board? Do we want to vote on this tonight? Imogen?
I think that perhaps postponing it or extending the public hearing would probably be a good idea, because I do think there were several valid points, exactly like you said, like, making the three-way stop sign, making sure that we're thinking about narrowing down the road, where to put sidewalks. I think all of those are important to consider. So I would be in favor of extending the public hearing on this.
Okay, do you want to bring it up at a future meeting? Relatively soon. And so maybe Corey, I think that, and members of the board, please correct me if I'm wrong, there are several things to consider, and they could be separate orders here. A three-way stop at Chadwick and School, a narrowed down or other traffic calming measure at the entrance to River, and other people asked about the feasibility of putting a sidewalk in Chadwick at the time we put the sidewalks on River. So, Mr. Manager.
If I may, just a note to the virtual audience and the in-person audience. We did have an email distribution list based on people that attended the meeting that we held outside last summer, or maybe it was 2 summers ago. If you're not on that list, if you want to send an email to manager@actonma.gov, and we'll make sure that you're included on future distributions to that list. You also have the ability to subscribe to notices of public hearings, but that would get you everything. And if you're just interested about this, I can add you to our list. And also the public hearing, the documents related to this discussion on the second, there's a link to them on the second page of the agenda where you can access the traffic study that was referenced tonight.
Jim.
To add to your list of issues we should be looking at is speed limit as well.
Okay. I'm not taking any more comments now. So we'll bring this up at another meeting again soon. Thank you, everybody. Our next public hearing, notice is hereby given under, thank you very much, Corey. Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138, Section 12 of the General Laws that the Select Board will hold a public hearing on May 23rd, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, Acton Town Hall, and remotely via video conference and call-in on the application of Lyonnaise, Inc. for a change in manager from Gerard Labrosse to Joan Labrosse for an all-alcohol license as a common vittler at 416 Great Road, Acton. From a computer, please click on the link to join the public meeting, actonma.gov/meeting/BOS, or from a telephone dial 646-876-9923 and enter the webinar ID 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raised hand feature to speak. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. This is related to the Lyonnaise restaurant. I don't believe, is there a representative? Oh, would you mind sharing with us the details of your request? Thank you.
Yes, please.
My husband and I ran Lyonnaise for 50 years. He passed in December, and I'm requesting the change. That's it.
Thank you. Do you intend to keep the restaurant open?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to be keeping the restaurant open? Sorry, it's hard to
I'm putting it on sale, and if it sells as a restaurant, we'll need the liquor license.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Any questions or comments from members of the public? Any online comments? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing. Thank you.
Move we close the hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any further discussion on the part of the board? I would take a motion then to approve the change in manager at Lyonnaise for an all-alcohol license as a common fiddler at 469 Great Road.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So Dean moves and Fran seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. And our last public hearing, the Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on May 23rd, 2022, continued from May 9th, 2022 at 7:40 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room 204 at the Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, and virtually at actonmad.gov/meeting/BOS on the application of 42 Knox Trail LLC, CO Troy Gunther for a site plan special permit under zoning bylaw, section 10.4 at 42 Knox Trail. The applicant proposed to conduct a building trade shop to manufacture and store stone walls. Application materials and how to participate remotely are available online at Acton Town Hall at doc.actonmad.gov/views/collection-14812/collection-14813. So this, the applicant has requested that we continue this. Mr. Manager, is there a date that they would like it continued to?
Yes, I think June 6th would work, and I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I think if we said 8 o'clock, it wouldn't interfere with anything.
Okay, so I would take a motion to continue this hearing to June 6th at 8 o'clock.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of continuing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Okay. On to our first new business item, which is selection of officers. I would like to say that I believe that there are a few essential principles in this process. And a couple of good to have guidelines. So the first essential principle, I think, is that a member who would fill the office have the time and inclination to fulfill the position. It's also essential for a majority of the members to have trust and confidence in the person being selected. It's good if members have a choice when selecting an officer, and it's good for the board to share the officer experience across members. To that end, I'd like to have a process where the board nominates, discusses, and votes for the chair, vice chair, and clerk. The board has traditionally not taken public comment during this officer selection. I would like to continue that. Just to detail the process a little bit, first for nominations, I would encourage members not to be shy about nominating themselves if they feel that they would be interested for an office. In that case, I would ask any other member to second that nomination. If a member is nominated by another member, I'll ask that member, the member being nominated, to second to affirm their interest. I'll ask for nominations of members other than the current office holder first, and then open it up for other nominations, including the current office holder. After the nominations, we can discuss, and each nominee can advocate for themselves. If there's a single member nominated, we'll just have an up or down vote. If there are more than one, then we'll have a roll call where you can vote for the person of your choice. If no member gets 3 votes, we'll drop the person with 1 vote and vote again. Comments? Questions? Okay. I first open it up then for nominations for chair. And then to start with, other than me.
I'd nominate Dean.
Okay. And I'll open up for nominations for anybody.
I nominate Jim Snyder Grant.
Okay.
And I'll second that nomination.
Sorry, we should probably second it. So I'm sorry, we should go back just to Dean. Someone second Dean?
I'll second.
Okay. Yeah, and then you nominated Jim, so I'm going to ask Jim to second his nomination.
Sure, yes.
Okay. Any other nominations?
I nominate David for vice chair. Or are we going to do chair first and then vice chair?
We're just going to do one at a time. So I'll give each of the 2 people nominated the opportunity to advocate for themselves. One of you want to go first?
What's a little complicated here is that I'm going to be advocating for Dean. But there's some pros and cons in there, so we'll call this advocating for myself. I think we've heard the sensible reasons why we have a rotation. I'm not going to get into that again, except to say that in the case of the financial matters, serving on the Acton Leadership Group and working on the budget, I have not had the experience that I would like to have in order to do that. I was looking forward to taking a year to learn more about that. The other thing I'd like to address is the concerns that have been expressed about Dean and address them. They mostly center around claims about a possible lack of experience or unhelpful attitudes in dealing sensitively with issues that have racial equity and racism involved. So I had a couple comments about that. First, unlike a year ago, we've now had, a year's worth of meetings, 100 hours to work with Dean and understand how he works. And what I've seen is that Dean keeps voting with the rest of us on these kinds of issues when they come up. Indigenous Peoples Day, accepting the DEIC report, proceeding with research and interviews on how to structure a DEIC position. Now, he does sometimes, usually, note some concerns. Dean has described himself as somewhat more conservative than the rest of us, and he brings those concerns in, but then he goes ahead and helps create a unanimous vote for moving forward. So I don't see him using the power of setting the agenda as chair to pull us away from the work we are doing, because he's actually been a part of the work. Plus, agendas are set with the participation of a vice chair and the town manager, so a variety of perspectives are represented in that process. The next thing is, I'd rather have us deal with issues about, if we see each other having a lack of sensitivity or a lack of knowledge, I'd like to see us deal with that by calling each other in rather than calling each other out. So in this case, if I hear Dean say something that I think is problematic, I want to go talk to him about it. And my experience of talking with you, Dean, is that you listen. You change your mind sometimes. You are not arrogant. You listen. So that's the way I really prefer to deal with this. Now I'm not saying that citizens need to do this. It's part of what we take on as elected officials. People will bring complaints forward, sometimes quite publicly, and we need to be able to react undefensively. I'm just saying that as board members, we can be of help to each other by being direct and honest and respectful. And we can all learn from each other and create a better board that way. I'd much prefer that we do that rather than preemptively denying him again a chance to be chair. People have mentioned the vote issue. That resonates with me to some extent, and I don't think it's quite clear to me. The voting, the fact that more people voted for Dean than voted for me and then voted for you and all that. And it's clear that that's not because half of the town wants to, stop making progress on inclusivity and racial diversity. It's because Dean has experiences and skills that are useful to the town, and people saw that and voted for him. Our commitment to anti-racism work is not a fad that's going to go away. It's very strong. It can survive having a slightly more conservative chair for a year. And I'd much rather proceed that way with us all working together and creating a model of how to work together rather than extending the model of, sort of dividing the town up into good guys and bad guys. So that's my speech.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. So, I would look forward to serving as chair. I think I'm well prepared to move up to be chair, having spent two terms now as vice chair. And I've learned a lot from two different chairs who had totally and complete different personalities and different approaches to the work. So I think I've seen the pluses and minuses of both of those. So I think that's valuable. And whatever happens with this election, certainly I look forward to working with Jim and all the members of the board in the future. As was pointed out, I come from a different political point of view than the other members of the board. But we found some great points of agreement. And I think, although David and I have had some really spirited discussions in the past, I think we've had coffee a few times and realized that on a lot of the core issues in town, we tend to agree more than we disagree. And I think that's a very positive situation to be in, that we can disagree on some things, agree on others, and still act respectfully and in the best interests of the town. So however the election comes out, I continue to be a dedicated public servant for the town, as I've been for many, many years. And I look forward to working with everybody else on the board in whatever role you decide is appropriate.
Thank you. General discussion? Imogen.
Thank you. So I think that for me, it's a difficult decision, but I think that it comes down to maybe my unique perspective as a new board member, and also, let's call it out, a very young board member. I would say that for me, following tradition for tradition's sake, for me, I think that it does lead to many pitfalls, and I think we always have to caution ourselves about that. Every position that's here is a learning curve. Every single one of us here had to learn how to adjust to the role of being a select board member. It was not an easy process for any of us. There are gaps, with our current knowledge that we had to fill being on this board. And equally, I would argue for a chair and vice chair and town clerk position, which are positions of leadership within the select board, there does comprise a learning curve as well, and I think that that's going to be inevitable. I do respect that there is a natural progression for a reason, and I do appreciate the benefits of having turnover within that leadership in order to provide more perspectives. I think that us as a board can benefit from that. I think that it's also important to note that being in any position of leadership is a privilege, as was stated before. It's not a right. No one is automatically entitled to it. You have to earn it. And I think that everyone here recognizes that. And for me, it's also, my decision is definitely going to come down to looking at what I view as what the select board priority should be, and everyone is going to have their different priorities, and that's, you know, and that in many ways will determine how we lean. And a lot of times, you know, we talk about issues that are partisan, and I think that, as many people stated, you know, it's not, I think that we need to take a step back and, you know, if we do prioritize issues such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would argue those are not partisan issues. Those should be nonpartisan issues. Those should be issues that every single person cares about. And I would say that people who prioritize it and have made it a focal point, you know, that I think that should be considered. And so I think that, I'll stop my rant there, but those are at least just, you know, that's how I'm going to be framing my decisions. And so I recognize every person's service on the board. You know, everyone here has really given so much to be, you know, to be in this position of service. And it's a really important role. And so I think that we can't underestimate that. And I think that's what's going to be framing my decision today.
Other discussion? Fran?
I just have a quick comment in that I too am struck by the status quo. I don't think that it like, to echo what Hema just said, it's not, it is a privilege and not a given. And I also believe in the natural progression, but there's nothing in the town charter that says, that even lists a progression like that. And I've watched Jim actually blossom in the role that he is in now, and I would completely support him in the chair position, and I know that he would rise to the occasion. And I've listened to a lot of constituents, and he would have a lot of support in that regard. That's it.
Other general comments? I completely agree with the people who, at the beginning of the meeting, who said this is a nonpartisan decision. I think that we all work together in a nonpartisan fashion already. In fact, I have said a couple of times that, you know, so first of all, for OML reasons, we can kind of only collaborate with one other member of the board on any given issue. You know, we can't get three of us together outside of a meeting. And so you have to choose someone to collaborate with on any given issue. And I've probably collaborated with Dean on more issues than any other member. However, I don't believe in the round robin thing at all. You know, I think it's nonsense actually to decide 3 years ahead who's going to be chair and not even knowing what the makeup of the board is going to be at that time. I think it's much more important that the chair have confidence in the chair, and I think it's in some ways, in fact, more important for us than it is for members of the public, because, you know, when it comes to decision making, all of our votes are equal with it, regardless of the chair. But for each of us relies on the chair to be our proxy for everything here. So I think it's actually more important for the members of the board than the members of the public. I think this is a very tough decision for me. I think Jim is very detail-oriented, would be really good in being prepared and analyzing the various things that come up. Again, Dean, I think Dean knows a lot about town government and things, and is also good. My issue, my biggest issue, and maybe Dean can address this, is, a year ago this month, I nominated Dean to be chair, and I strongly encouraged him to take the chairmanship. He didn't do that. And that was because people were attacked from this board, and we needed a different chair at the time. And Dean didn't do that, and he defended the previous chair. And since then, the people that defended the previous chair, I don't think have gone and apologized to the people who are attacked. And I think that's very significant to me. I don't know, Dean, if you have anything to say as to why you did that at the time. I would have loved to have you be chair a year ago. And then we wouldn't have had the election where I was elected. So I don't know if you have a comment and whether you've reached out to the people who are attacked and apologized to them.
Well, there's a couple of issues here. One is I'm more than willing to apologize for anything that I did or anything that I said, but it's never been my philosophy to apologize for something that somebody else said or somebody else did. I can certainly express solidarity with people that feel that they've been attacked, but I don't believe in the whole philosophy of apologizing for something. I think that rings very shallow. As regards to my support at that time and for retaining the chair, I would remind you that it was a 3-2 vote to retain the chair. Mr. Benson had made statements that, frankly, I would not have made, but I think they were made in the heat of the moment, and especially where there's a situation where he was only going to be chair for another 2 months. It seemed to me like a very adversarial thing to do, to attempt to basically impeach the chair at that point. Mr. Benson and I have been acquainted for many years, and I'm in a situation where I prize fairness and I also prize loyalty. So I think that's what swayed my decision to decline the opportunity to move up to be chair for that 2-month period.
Thank you. Any final comments? Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I think that I just wanted to note that, David, thank you so much for being chair this year. I will say that, navigating all the complexities that this year brought, complexities with our budget, difficulties with having, DIB discussions, those are all really challenging things to navigate. And I will say that, I support the decisions that you've made for the most part. I think that you've done the role of chair really well. And so just wanted to thank you for that. And I think it's cool to have turnover, but I think it's also important to recognize the current leadership. And so, Dean, thanks for being vice chair, and Jim, town clerk, as well. I think that it's, we navigated a really tough year, and we should give ourselves a pat on the back for that.
Okay, if there are no more comments, we'll vote. I'll call members one at a time, and please say Jim or Dean. Himija.
Jim.
Fran.
Jim.
Jim. Dean.
Dean.
Is there anything we can do or say that would be helpful?
I actually have a question that maybe you can answer. Wow, that was really loud. One thing that you mentioned, David, is the importance of just having the capacity to do the job, just because it is a really time-consuming job, requires a lot of research. It requires you sometimes being prepared more so than us board members. So I guess my question is, I'd love to hear from each of you whether you believe you have the capacity and the time and effort to dedicate to a really heavy role like this one.
Yes, what I would regret is that to do it, I would need to give up being on the Green Acton board and doing much leadership with the Acton Climate Coalition for the next year. So it would make me sad, but I can do that.
So I certainly think I've got the time and the energy to put the effort in. There's challenges I'm familiar with. I'm not heavily involved with other activities other than serving the town. As a matter of fact, I just recently declined to get reappointed on the board of the Acton Lions Club in anticipation of no matter what happens tonight, just realized that I couldn't keep that many balls up in the air at the same time. So I was certainly willing to make whatever sacrifices needed to make sure that, this would be my primary focus.
I'll vote for Dean. So it's 3-2 for Dean. I'm sorry? So, no, I'm not taking any comment. I'm not taking any comment. Quiet, please. Quiet, please. Dean, would you like to chair the gavel now, or do you want me to finish this agenda item?
Enjoy the rest of the evening, David.
The evening, or usually we switch at the end of the agenda item, but I'm happy to do whatever you want. I'll at least finish this, and then we can talk again. So I'll take nominations now for vice chair for anybody but its current office holder, which is he already has another office. So nominations for vice chair. Dean.
I would nominate Jim.
I'll second that.
This might go much quicker. Jim.
Wait, no.
Sorry.
He's already been done and seconded. Is there another nomination for vice chair?
Yes, I'd like to nominate you, David, for vice chair.
Okay. Any others? Oh, so is there a second for me?
Oh, sure.
I actually, by my rules, I should second, so I will second for me. Any other nominations? Jim, you want to go first?
Sure. A bunch of things I'm looking forward to about being vice chair. One is getting more involved in the ALG process and learning more about budgets. The second is being able to work with Dean and the town manager on the agenda and learn more about that process, which has been somewhat mysterious to me. Yeah, and it feels like good practice for preparing to be chair, which if I run for re-election and get re-elected, I would be happy to be chair.
For me, I'm happy to do this if people would like me to do it. My biggest interest is being on ALG. I'm liaison to both the Finance Committee and the School Committee. I've invested heavily in understanding the town finance, and so it's just a strong interest of mine. I will say, however, and this is not for really discussion for tonight, is that there's nothing in the ALG charge that requires the chair and the vice chair to be the ALG reps. We can select any liaisons we want to ALG. So that could go either way. So any general discussion? Dean.
So again, I look forward to working with everybody. Especially, there's been some discussion about, a progression and learning curve that people go through. Certainly that I went through in my progression is from clerk to vice chair. And I look forward to working with Jim, especially with the infamous agenda call with the town manager that can get really interesting and really involved. And certainly encourage Jim to stay on for another term. On the other hand, David, I've been very impressed with the fine job that you did representing the town during the ALG process. And certainly, I agree with you that you certainly have a very excellent understanding and relationship with both school committee and finance committee, which are very important. So, however, whether it can be a formalized position in ALG or whether it's just you'll be the elder statesman that will be able to give lots of advice to whoever is vice chair and myself, that would be great. So I value the idea of bringing people up, and I look forward to working with Jim, but if it goes the other way, David, you and I have had a good working relationship, and I hope that'll continue.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, sorry, please go ahead.
Sorry, it takes my brain a little a bit of time. So I guess one question that might help me make my decision is, in terms of the vice chair position, based on, what you know of the role and what you think you can add to it, what's maybe one thing you would bring to the role? You mentioned, working with the ALG, working with the chair. Is there anything specific that you would like to bring to the position?
I'd like shorter meetings. That might mean having more meetings. That's okay by me. I'd like to, so in thinking about the agenda, I'd like to make sure we have time for, at every other meeting or so, to dive into an issue that's not a specific urgent decision, but is more of a policy discussion. I think we don't get enough of those. In general, I have a really strong interest and experience in having meetings be fun and productive. I think our meetings are productive. They're not very fun. And I think we can do something to shift that ratio.
I think for me, if I was vice chair, I think that the biggest thing I bring is the financial aspects, so which I've already mentioned. The other about the financial stuff, I don't feel the need to go to ALG and speak about things. I want an excuse to be forced to go and listen so that I can start learning. So if we arrange things in such a way that, David, you're speaking and working with me to bring me up to speed on what's going on, that would meet my needs. I just feel like I need to get more engaged on the financial side of things. Sure, and whatever happens, we can discuss that during our liaison discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments? We can vote now then. Imogen?
Can I go last? I'm still thinking.
Okay, Fran?
Jim Snyder Grant.
So Fran votes for Jim. Dean?
Jim Snyder, right?
Dean votes for Jim.
Oh, I'll vote for me, sure.
And I will also vote for Jim. And Hemija.
Yeah, I'll vote for Jim as well.
So that's unanimous. So for... We haven't gotten to clerk yet. For clerk, nominations for, except for Jim and Dean.
Before I nominate you, David, how much do you like taking notes?
Well, I'll have to say that when I was clerk, I was a different kind of clerk than Jim was. You know, Jim is much better at being detail-oriented than I am. Yeah, I took terse notes and then reviewed Lisa's notes, whereas Jim's notes are more complete, though quite hard to read. And feel free to nominate yourselves if you'd like.
Now, Hemija, how much do you like taking notes?
I feel like maybe school should have prepared me for this. It would definitely be a learning curve, but I'm open to it. I'm open to learning.
I would nominate Hemija.
Second.
Actually, I'll ask Hemija to second.
Oh, yeah, sure, I'll second.
Okay. Hemija. Another nomination? Okay, for this one, I will just take an up or down vote, and we can take a voice vote. All in favor of Hemija for clerk, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That's unanimous. Okay. Dean, do you want to pick up?
Sure. All right, thank you. Now to the less exciting things. Although here we have a review the Hayward Road intersection reconstruction. That's probably going to get really exciting. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I'd invite Director York to reappear if he could. This is a project that we brought to the Select Board within the last year with the 25% design, and we identified some options for how that Hayward Road at Main Street intersection could be reconfigured. And at that time, the board supported a specific design which included a traffic signal, which would be a new condition for that intersection. And so we're at the point now where we're checking back in with the board. Corey's been working with the design team, and we are at the 75% design. And Corey, I hope you can share your screen and show us a little bit about what where we're at right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Try. Can you see the?
We can see, but it's not presentation mode.
Oh.
You could probably just zoom in on this slide, and it might be good enough.
For some reason, my mouse isn't working. There we go. That better?
Yes.
Yeah. So as John said, we went through the 25% design hearing. We selected a concept that we've been working with the engineers to advance that. So we're at a 75% design level. So we went through a series of taking a little bit more in-depth look and advancing that concept. So this is sort of the draft plan showing the lane configurations, sort of the new road widenings in some places, and even a little bit of a narrowing in some places. But so it shows they submitted this for just review and comment. I believe we're looking at trying to do another public forum sometime in early June. So we were looking just to go through here and see if there was anything that really catches our eye that needs to be tweaked. I think for the example here, I just gave the plan sheet that has the pavement markings and signage. So you'll see, you see the new crosswalks at the intersections. You'll see those shaded areas are where the bike lanes would come in. So there's, you see the dash lines where the bike lanes are cutting through the intersection. And then on Hayward Road, you see the bike lane there that has like a bike box in the front, so that it has an area that would detect the bikes. There'd be across Main Street, there's a mast arm being proposed there for the signals that would be facing both approaches. And then there'd be some signal posts on the other corners for the other signals and pedestrian signals for a signalized crossing. The project itself, we had them extend up into Coughlin Street, up that way. So as you look up there, they show a little bit of a road narrowing there, reduce some of the pavement, kind of shorten that crossing. To make it a little bit shorter of a distance for a pedestrian trying to cross the street there. And if you look across the street at Musket Drive, there is a tree there, so we worked with the consultant to preserve that tree. So the sidewalk is pretty close to where it is now. We're trying to stay away from that tree location. And you'll see, so as we come back down towards the Hayward and Main, that center island that unfortunately the tractor trailers are sort of tripping over and clipping the sign, that would be removed. It's a painted island there. And then we show an extension of a sidewalk going down Main Street, heading towards sort of where the senior housing would be. And you see a kind of bump out there. So one thing we're looking at is the potential of, there's a large tree there as well. So trying to preserve that tree. So some of that work there, when you're on that side, is going to involve easements. So that's something we haven't approached the neighbor yet, but we're trying to get it designed to a point that made it, that we were comfortable with as we get ready to start talking to the public about all these. So that's kind of the general gist of what you see here. This plan shows a series of the different signs. One of the things would be the no turn on red. So the right turn onto Hayward Road would have a no turn on red. And I believe same with Hayward Road, I think would have a no turn on red as well. So, so some modifications there, and you'll see on the Main Street northbound, you see the staggered stop lines there. So the left turn lane is staggered back. That allows the larger truck traffic, the maneuvering, to come out of that intersection and make that swing to sort of head southbound towards Route 2. So there's components of that where they were doing turning templates, trying to make sure everything works, looking at the delays and things like that. So that's basically the project that we have right now before you. So any questions or comments, I can take those back to the consultant as they sort of fine tune this and get ready for the next step.
And if I may, and so Corey, the goal here with being before the board is before we go to a public forum, we want to make sure that if there's any concerns that this board has, that we don't go past those until, and present something that we already know there's an issue with. So from a high level, from this plan view or otherwise, if there's anything that stands out to you, or if you want us to look into further, as Corey mentioned, we were looking at early June for the forum, but it certainly could be extended till late June, or however much time is needed, depending on what concerns are brought up at this point.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from the board members? Jim?
Yeah, so I went back and looked at the November minutes, which is the last time we discussed this. And I just want to remind us that the vote to support it was 3-2. So it's not like a big ringing endorsement of the plan. So I think there may be, concerns that we'd like to look at more. Let's see, looking at the minutes, one particular question came up about whether there was any new information about either pedestrian safety or car safety, like accident information, after the pedestrian light went in and after the Hayward Road was widened. Because I guess we were speculating that perhaps those changes had already increased safety, and that was a good thing. Maybe we didn't need to do this whole plan. So I guess that's a question for Corey.
Yeah, at this time, I'll have to go back and talk to the consultant about that. We have the data as we were working on this. It's a matter of it's been simulated based on the timing of that installation.
Okay. Questions from other members of the board? David.
I don't have any questions, but I have just a few comments. I think this plan is excellent. I like the left-hand turn lane northbound on Main Street. I like the right-hand turn lane southbound on Main Street. I like the fact that there is no extra turn lane outbound from Hayward. I like the way the sidewalks are integrated here. I like the bike boxes, the bike lanes, the fact that now the intersection goes through Muscat and Coughlin. I think this it's worked out to be excellent. To address, the thing that Jim brought up, I think it's not just the crosswalk there at crossing Main Street to be able to get to Hayward, right? The bicycle safety through this intersection is significantly improved. You'd have to, be experienced / gutsy rider to take the left-hand turn from on a bicycle northbound on Main Street onto Hayward. I mean, you can do it. I would do it, but it's a gutsy thing. I think no parent would want their 15-year-old to do that. I also will say the way the intersection is currently, the fact that buses can get out of Hayward at all is due and requires this coordination of 3 lanes of traffic to stop for them. And it doesn't always happen, right? I'm sure that all of us have driven through that intersection, at morning or afternoon bus times. And the buses can't get out of there and until usually someone northbound stops. Usually the right-hand person northbound stops. Then the left-hand person decides not to go. Then the other people southbound eventually stop. And then a whole line of buses comes out because everybody now waits for 3 or 4 buses to come out. And that was a huge problem, right? I also think it's not only the buses problem, but it's the 16-year-old new drivers coming out of Hayward. Turning left onto Main Street as a new driver is, again, it's a gutsy move. And I think this intersection design increases the safety here for new drivers enormously. And I have heard from parents of 16-year-olds, of course their 16-year-olds become 17 and 18-year-olds, and then the parents are less concerned. But I've heard of, from before I was on the board, till now, people concerned about their new drivers coming out of Concord and turning left, coming out of Newtown and turning left, or coming out of Hayward and turning left. So I think, we've made a few improvements to this over time. I really like the way it is now.
Thank you. Yeah, from my point of view, it seems like I've spent a good chunk of my life stuck at the intersection of Hayward and Main because of where I live. I think the improvement to school-related traffic, whether it be buses or parents or young drivers, the improvements to that school-age population is just really critical in this area, and I think this should do it. Also, I've witnessed, constant issues with large truck traffic from Harts getting in through that intersection, so I think you've solved some of those problems as well. So I think that's all good, and I'm really very much in favor of this plan. The one point that I would like to make is that when you plan on the next forum, I'd like to make sure that there'd be a real positive effort made by town staff to reach out to some of the abutters within a reasonable radius of the intersection, the ones that are going to be impacted by it, not only in the short term with construction, but also, obviously, there's going to be traffic lights there. There's going to be idling cars there, probably fewer idling cars there once you have a rational traffic solution than what happens right now, but I think it's important to make sure that people within maybe a 300-foot radius or 500-foot radius of this actually be affirmatively notified that there'll be a forum coming up, so that we make sure that we hear their input. Imogen.
Thank you. Yes, actually, on that point, one question for Corey is, in terms of the outreach to the public for this public forum, I was wondering if you were planning on reaching out to people just living within that radius, or maybe like sending a more town-wide blast, just because I know that, well, as was mentioned, a lot of there are a lot of school children on that road, a lot of buses that go through there. I feel like this specific intersection does affect more of the town, so I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, typically with a forum like this, we work with John and IT to post it on the website to get alerts out as much as we can that way. In addition to this has an impact with the schools, we try to reach out to the schools to get it, the word out that way, to get distributed as much as possible. So we do try to reach out much further beyond just direct abutters or a certain radius, because a lot of commuter traffic through here and school traffic, so we try to hit all those to get them aware of it and to get them to sort of look at it and get their comments.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? First, anyone in the room?
I'm a little confused. Is this going to be stop signs or traffic lights?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my hearing aids, but I think it's the traffic lights.
It's okay. I'm saying, is there going to be traffic lights from now on once this is done, or like stop signs?
I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'll hand it off to Corey. Would you describe exactly what the traffic control will be there?
Yeah, this would be a signalized intersection is what's being proposed. So there'll be traffic signals for all the approaches, alert traffic when to stop and go.
Okay, great. My last question is there any plans to fix the sidewalks along all of, from that point on up to the point where we get here to Town Hall? Because a lot of our sidewalks are kind of hazardous. There's been damage, and if you guys are gonna do this, which is much needed. Even I, as a 41-year-old, not only scared for my soon-to-be my 17-year-old that is going to be driving soon, but even I have issues and get scared coming out of Hayward or going into Hayward. People pretty aggressive when you're trying to let people come through, but definitely plans on fixing our sidewalks there would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Tara from West Acton. Thank you, Dean. Good first move on the first day to notify abutters They're the most vulnerable people, the parents and children, are the people that live around, which effectively, when these traffic lights go in, they create a race course situation to get through the light. They also create idling where it doesn't need to be because they could have gone if it was a stop sign, as the person from Prospect in Maine was very concerned. And I urge that the radius of the abutter notices go into the development because the people were very concerned about the cut-through situation when people are stuck at lights. I realize that it would maybe seem the same when it's a stop sign, but the stop sign situation, it's only clogged there for a couple hours a day. And so I urge you to be inclusive in the abutter notices, mailed paper copy butter notices to a wide enough range of the people that will be affected by the cut-through situation. In particular, there are people with disabilities that live in the neighborhood, the Musket Drive and the other drive into the, I forget what it's called, but the heights there, Presidential Heights. They are concerned, and they didn't, when I emailed them, when I saw the agenda, they had no idea that this was coming. So I urge you to send out paper, mailed copies to people within a quarter mile. Thank you, at least.
Thank you. Matt, do we have any online questions?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So, Jim.
Looking through the minutes again, had another question. There was an unknown about adding the extra left turn lane, if that would require widening to the point that there would be expensive ledge work. And that was one of the things we were looking for as the design got developed. And I didn't know whether this was enough of a development to figure that out, or whether that's still a mystery of how that might increase the cost.
I know in looking at this design, the engineer was trying to be cautious of what we knew for known ledge. So that I think we're trying to minimize that as much as possible while still trying to improve the intersection. So I can work with them to get more of a identification of what they've seen, but I know they were trying to be cognizant of that, not get too much cost in there as doing a huge amount of blasting.
Mm-hmm. And just a final comment about the cut-throughs. So what we're basically talking about is changing the wait times for, that awful wait on Hayward when we're waiting, trying to go on Main Street. They're cutting that down from 3 minutes to 90 seconds. And it's 3 minutes of, it could be shorter, it could be longer, sort of it's unpredictable time, and it become a predictable time. So that's a nice feature. It does then, of course, create backups north and south on 27. And that's, that's an unfortunate trade-off. I'm not sure it's an improvement. So that's why so from a traffic flow point of view, I'm not particularly enthusiastic, but any of the safety features I'm very enthusiastic about. The cut-through issues, well, actually they were both ways. So, and it cut both ways, because on the one hand, if you reduce the traffic backup on Hayward, then you have fewer people who are coming on Hayward than cutting through Jefferson, like northbound. But if you add a backup on 27, you have more people who are coming south going, there's a light there, I'm going to turn right. And then, so they then add traffic to the back streets. Now, what you pointed out, Dean, was that, these are still public streets. It's not part of our goal to keep cars off of streets. But you did suggest at the time that if it does change the traffic patterns, it might be wise to look at widening those streets, the back streets, so that if there's going to be more traffic, let's at least make it safe enough to have bike lanes, sidewalks, room for people to get around. These are not. The streets aren't owned by the cars. They're our streets. That's all.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one advantage to the traffic light from an Acton Center point of view is that the traffic will be pulsed a little bit, right? Which, you know, we're not proposing to signalize Acton Center, and therefore it gives we're making it better, you know, by not having as many directions of travel through the Newtown Concord Road intersection, but that's all. And secondly, I just wanted to, this is completely separate. One important thing to move forward with this is there are the infrastructure bill did pass the federal government, and so there's money around, and so if we have a shovel-ready design, we may be able to leverage some of that money.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Well, Mr. Manager, I don't know what you need from us. I think the next step, if Corey's got in mind to do a forum with proper notification, I think pretty much it seems like all thumbs up on the design that we have right now.
Thank you. We will let you know what the date looks like for that, and we'll be able to announce it at the next meeting, or sooner, I guess I should say.
Okay, thank you. All right. Item 8, installing new 25-mile-per-hour signs, Mass R29B signs. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. We've been working to improve signage throughout the community, and this is another example of that. I wonder if Corey has a picture of what these signs look like. I know there's one in the packet, right? Oh, you're muted. And could you just also tell us more about the intent of this request and why it's before the board, Corey?
Sure. Yeah, so we have, as you know, back in the 2020 special town meeting, there was an article that talked about the Modernization Act for the town. And so the town had adopted those provisions. It was kind of two parts. One was adopting components of Section 17C of Mass General Law, Chapter 90. And what that did was give the town, the select board, the authority to establish in thickly settled, unposted roads, or they don't have a posted speed limit now. The thickly settled before the opt-in was 30 miles an hour. This allows the thickly settled to be 25 miles an hour. So if you can see my screen, on the bottom left, you'll see a sign that says thickly settled on top with the speed limit 25, and ours would say townwide. And on the bottom of it says unless otherwise posted. What that is streets that have an approved posted speed limit now would still govern. This is for the unposted streets. And these signs would be are proposed to be installed sort of all the gateways coming into Acton. So I think there's approximately about 17 locations or so where as commuters are driving, or drivers are coming into Acton, you would put these at all the town lines areas. So they're being forewarned that we did do that opt-in. So it'd be a 25 mile an hour for the unposted thickly settled versus the prior, which is 30. If you look at the sign, the other sign on the right is the yellow thickly settled 25 mile an hour. And in speaking with the state, I was asking some clarification because we have gotten questions about posting individual streets. They informed me that the select board, if they opted to approve, say we had an unposted road that we wanted to add a 25 mile an hour sign to reinforce that element, we could. That's the approved sign that we'd be putting up on those streets. It wouldn't be the regulatory white and black. It would be that advisory sign that's being shown right now. I think what we're looking at tonight would be just getting your getting your okay to proceed putting up the sort of the townwide thickly settled 24-hour signs and sort of all the entrances as you drive into Acton to try to alert everyone as they're coming in that this is in effect.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? David?
Yeah, does, I assume that this is a good thing for the police to enforce speeds on back roads. Is that actually a true statement? Did have the police weighed in on this?
Back when we did the special town meeting, we worked with the police on it and we were doing it. I haven't worked with them recently. We were just getting ready to look at putting these up, which helps because as they're doing enforcement on these unposted streets, we would need to have that signage in place for them to help reinforce the new speed limit.
I think this is a good idea. Concord does this. It, gives us a chance to do this. I have one other question, completely hypothetically. If I know that normally changing the speed limit requires a study where we need to determine the current percentile speeds and that kind of thing. But does this allow us, again, completely hypothetically, to take down speed limit signs, say on a street like River Street? And then is it 25 miles an hour?
No, that because those have approved special speed regulations, this doesn't affect those streets. In order to change those special speed regulations, we'd have to go through a speed study and go through the normal process.
Okay, that's what I suspected. But I still think this is a good idea. There's a number of back roads that have straight sections, and people shouldn't be flying down them. Thank you.
So, Corey, I would expect probably this would apply in large part to some of the subdivisions of town which don't have posted speed limits. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of that, like as you said, a lot of those streets, they don't have speed limit signs. You'll see some of the older streets that potentially don't. I think it came up when the North Acton Fire Station came up. I don't believe Harris Street has a study to if it met the thickly settled, it would apply to streets like that. Predominantly probably subdivisions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we've certainly heard enough earlier in the evening about speeding cars, so it doesn't seem to be going away. Any other questions from members of the board? Jim.
As I said before, I'm not much on signs as a way of actually changing behavior, so I don't have a strong sense of that this is going to do much good, but I'm happy not to stand in the way if folks think it's a good idea. It certainly couldn't hurt. I just don't think it'll help much.
Thank you.
Tara, West Acton. I love this idea. I would hope that it says townwide, not citywide. I have a couple of questions. Townwide instead of citywide, because it's town, right? And so it was my understanding that the town can put in place a safety zone on a numbered highway. They have them in Sudbury where they're 25 miles an hour, and I've heard that they can't change the speed limit from 30 in West Acton, for example, because it's a state highway. Well, why are other towns doing it? So I started looking into this and found out that the town has to declare a safety zone and then apply to the state or something like that. I urge us to do that. I love the idea of a town-wide 25 miles an hour, unless where nobody's living or something like that posted, but I don't want to ignore the highways. We live right on a highway, and they are just going 60 miles an hour down River Street, 60 miles an hour everywhere else. and at least gives the cops something that they can rely on in terms of enforcement. Right now, they say they can't do anything effectively, but more blinking lights, they help. Even though there's a rolling one down on 111 right now, and we just took a couple of chairs and sat down and watched everybody and started looking at the speed limit on the thing, and they seem to be working. The blinking lights seem to work really well. So I urge you not only to do the stagnant signs, but to do the live light signs with a smile, because I was in New Hampshire and they had one that had a smile on it when you were going the right speed. I thought that was kind of cool.
Would this include when you're coming in, when you're on Mass, on exit 43, you know how you take exit 43 and then you get onto Mass Ave? For the people that live at Yankee Village, it becomes a dangerous situation. Cars come flying. It's impossible sometimes. They're so rude. They honk at you. Is there a way to put a sign like this, right, coming off the highway onto Mass Ave to avoid? I'm surprised somebody hasn't gotten killed, to be honest with you. People don't even respect the buses. One of the reasons that I don't let my children take the bus in the morning is because, first of all, it's dangerous very early in the morning. If my oldest took her bus to Minuteman Tech, it's just, there's too many safety concerns with cars, random cars coming in and off of 43, but also the other reason is people just don't respect, they just continue flying by. So having a sign like this coming into Acton from exit 43 would be so helpful for the people that live at Yankee Village, and also possibly in the future adding a crosswalk where we could cross to the other side.
Okay. Corey, do you have any reaction to Ms. Cruz's questions?
I can, I could talk with the state. They manage that, Retro Road, but in addition to that, we do have the Kelly's Corner Improvement Project, which I think the roadway improvements, they don't go up that far, but they do get to the other side of Roach Brothers. So we have some roadway improvements going on right now that will hopefully work towards slowing down some of the vehicles, but I can reach out to the state whether or not we're allowed to put up an advisory sign at that location.
Thank you. All right, do we have any questions out in the virtual audience?
There are no raised hands.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, Mr. Manager, would you like a vote from us to approve this?
Yes, please.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the installation of these new 25-mile-per-hour MA-R2-9B signs in appropriate locations as determined by the Public Works Director.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Martin.
Second.
Second, Fran. Moved and seconded. Any other questions? Then let's have a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Manager.
Thank you for that support. Would you like me to address the next item? Corey.
Fine-looking family got there, Corey. All right, item 9, review Bruce Freeman Rail Trail wayfinding designs. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. So we've been awarded a grant to install some new signage along the Bruce Freeman, along the corridor that for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and the planning staff and our economic development director, along with working group that includes Select Board Member Arsenault, have been working on the preliminary designs, and there was a survey that was published last week. Like a lot of state grants, there's a quick turnaround. We have to spend the funding and have the signs fabricated by the end of the fiscal year, so the pace on this project is quicker than normal, but we're doing everything we can to do some engagement. We had about 135 people respond to the survey, and for the most part were favorable with the design concepts that were presented. I do have some show and tell here. So if you're familiar with some of the design concepts on the signage for the Bruce Marine Rail Trail, there's a dragonfly theme. And so the designer for this new wayfinding program is incorporating that into the signage so that it's a familiar look and feel. And it has a, sorry, it's black. This is the right side. And it's a cohesive design and look. And so I guess hopefully the board had a chance to see the signage, and if there's any feedback that you have as a board or individually, it'd be helpful to know that, because we're going to be continuing to move forward and providing this. This is an important project, not just for the rail trail. It's important for the business community along Great Road. It's important for the library. I know that I've discussed this with people at the library, that not everybody knows that while they're riding their bike, they could have access to millions of books and awesome materials and programs just up the road. So I think this wayfinding is a way to have people know that they're passing through some really cool and interesting things here in Acton, and encourage them to check it out.
Thank you. Yeah, I took a look at the survey and participated in it. Those are some great designs. I think they really fit nicely. So what's the next step?
Really just touching base to make sure that there's nothing that you think is horrible about what we're doing here, so we can continue to move forward.
David?
Just as a matter of feedback, I like the designs. I don't have them in front of me, so I can't identify which one, but that offered a little bit more information, like that gave the distance. I think that's important to, to say, pizza shop 1/10 of a mile, and people know that you're basically on top of it, or library 4/10 of a mile, and then they know, whatever it is, how far they're going to have to cycle. So I think that the distances and the names of things are it's better to have more information, I think. It'll help people.
And also using visuals with texts, I think, is important with words. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other? Mr. Manager.
So we would appreciate, actually, if the board would be willing to consider voting to support the design concepts that were presented in the packet and as part of that survey.
Go ahead.
I would move that we support the design concepts that were in the packet.
Okay.
Second. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Moved and seconded to support the design concepts we've seen. Any other discussion? All right. All in favor of Mr. Martin's motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Manager, approve revised building permit fees. Seems like we've seen this before.
Thank you. This is a follow-up discussion to one that we had, I believe it was at the last meeting, where we, throughout the organization, we've taken it very seriously from a staff standpoint. The climate emergency declaration that the town voted on last year, the select board's policy for environmental sustainability, that's been a key part of what drives what we do. And everyone across every department has embraced it and tried to find ways that they can be responsive to it, whether it's changing the electricity supply in our electrical accounts, or looking at changing the fleet that we have, or all kinds of different things. And our building commissioner identified a way that he thought he could make an incremental improvement to support sustainability initiatives, understanding that there's probably more that could be done in the building permitting process. He thought it would be good to try to advance two specific ideas that he had right now related to capping the amount of fees that we charge for rooftop solar installations and for Energy Star certified window installations. And those are the two items that we were looking for approval for the board to support the cap that he had proposed, that we had proposed. And the board's discussion at the last meeting, it seemed like there was interest in the idea, but there were some questions, bigger picture questions about fees generally, which I'm continuing to work on and can address going forward. But this is something that I think could be considered in the meantime.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Jim?
Yeah, I was one of the people that raised some legal questions last time, and looking forward to the answers. I got a preliminary. You communicated a preliminary note from Nina about this stuff, and it was clear that the questions and concerns I had were all about the bigger picture as you're talking about. So I think this is a great step. I think it's great that Tommy was able to put this forward, and I want to support them. I want to support this change.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I'm also in favor of making this change. I will say that, a resident expressed concerns about how we did the fees, but I don't think it's bad to have the dollar amount be a proxy for the work, right? I understand that there are potential pluses and minuses to any scheme, but if you change the scheme, it'll favor one group and not another group. But I think that trying to the dollar amount often is very heavy into the labor involved, and the labor correlates directly with the amount that needs to be inspected. And it may be easy to enumerate with a more complicated fee schedule for pretty standard projects like maybe a window. It's not so easy, I think, for random building projects, right? And so, if I build an entryway on the front of my house to cut out drafts, how does that get judged, right? And I think, I understand the point of view of the resident, and but I don't fully agree with it. I think that the dollar amount is not a bad proxy for the amount of work.
Thank you. Comments from any other members of the board? Imogen?
Sorry, can you actually repeat the two points that the building commissioner identified?
One was to establish a maximum amount charged in fees for the inspection of the installation of Energy Star certified windows. And the other was capping the amount of electrical fees, capping the amount of fees charged associated with rooftop solar installations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Just as I have a preview of, a future discussion, when we look at the climate action plan, there's going to need to be a lot of retrofit work. And on the other end, when we look at the climate action plan, new construction is a challenge environmentally. So if I was thinking about adjusting the fees in the long run, I'd want to reduce the rehab fees and increase the new construction fees. But again, I think that's major work. I understand to analyze that and make sure it's done in a legal way. And so it's just it's a direction that I'd like to see us moving in.
Thank you. Any?
That might do well with, properties in the historic districts as well. So that would be a good plan.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? We're fading fast. Okay.
We could call on them individually.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
So I would be willing to entertain a motion at this point.
Well, I would move that we approve these proposed changes to the building fee schedule.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Grant, Snyder Grant, seconded by Ms. Arsenault. Any other questions, comments? All right, all in favor of Mr. Snyder Grant's motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passed unanimously. Item 11, intermunicipal agreement for an electrical inspector with the town of Littleton. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. This is a project that we've been working on now for a little while, and basically the town of Littleton and the town of Acton currently utilize similar staffing to do electrical inspections, but there's no formal agreement for how their time is shared. And we believe that having a formal intermunicipal agreement that makes the person an employee of Littleton, and we're just helping to cover the cost of that employment, and they work for us. I think the split that we're considering is they're actually going to work for us 55% of the time, and 45% over there, which equates to 22 hours a week, which Commissioner Moberg believes is sufficient, and so it's one of those scenarios where it works out well for both communities in this case. And what this ask is of the board tonight is for you to authorize me to enter into this municipal agreement, which is drafted, I believe, as a 3-year agreement, but I would certainly be interested in just you authorizing for the first year, just see how it goes, if you're more comfortable with that approach.
Okay. Would you like us to review the agreement, or do you want to bring it back to us, or do you think we should just?
Yeah, you don't want to just review without ever seeing it? Sorry, I thought I'd sent it to you. I can describe it in great detail, and I can also bring it back again on June 6th. If
What's the? I'll point out that we have a number of intermunicipal agreements that are usually engineered by our town manager and brought back to us, and our eyes glaze over, and we approve them. So it's the view of the board. Would you like to see the agreement, or should we authorize the manager to move ahead with it? Jim.
This feels close enough to an employment and staffing issue that I'm entirely comfortable with the town manager handling it.
David.
I would agree with that. I just have one question, if I might. Today, how often do we hire an electrician, an outside electrician, to do an inspection? And how often do we use the employee of Littleton?
This employee does all of our inspections currently.
Thank you.
Unless he's on vacation, then we hire a sub, but he's our primary.
Hey, so Jim, I think your comment sounded like a motion.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. If it was a motion, it would be something like we approve the manager proceeding with this intermunicipal agreement with Littleton.
Second. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Allow the town manager to move ahead with developing this and getting it implemented.
Well, I'm sorry, are we doing that for the first year or for 3 years?
Happy to take suggestions on my motion, whether to make it 1 year or 3.
David?
I'm happy to leave it open so that the town manager decides. And whatever he thinks is prudent. If he's squeamish about it, he could do 1 year. If he's confident about it, he could do 3 years.
Yeah, authorized to create whatever length contract between 1 and 3 years that you choose.
And I'll accept the friendly second.
Okay.
Okay. So, motion on the floor, it's been seconded. Any final comments? If not, let's vote. All in favor of Mr. Snyder-Grant's motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, Mr. Manager, you got your marching orders.
Thank you for the support. I appreciate it.
Okay, item 12. So Acton is being honored this year because this will be our 25th year as a Tree City USA. It's actually something I was involved in early on in my career. We were a Tree City for a number of years, and it lapsed. And then due to the outstanding efforts of our Public Works Director, Corey York, and our tree warden, Ryan Hunt, we've been reestablished for the last couple of years, and now we hit 25 years. So it's kind of a big deal. So Department of Conservation and Recreation has an award ceremony and a little get-together of representatives from all the towns getting Tree City USA awards. And this year, they've asked to hold it at Narrow Park. And they have asked for a member of the select board or the town manager to come up and make some remarks, which I would be delighted to do. And certainly I would invite anybody else on the board that would like to come up as well. You know, hang around with a bunch of people who've shaken the sawdust out of their clothes for the day. So I think it's a great honor, and I just really wanted to let everybody know that we are receiving this honor this year, and it's really, I think it's important for us because this board and previous boards have prioritized the environmental protection and planting trees and protecting trees, and even the most recent town meeting that we had passed a non-binding resolution to look at some more tree regulations. So I think it's really important that Acton has been sort of a leader in this sort of thing, and we continue to be. And it's a great honor for us to host this event. So that's it, just advisory. It's going to be on June 8th, and certainly I will get more information out if any members of the board wish to attend. Say hi. There'll probably be 50 or 60 tree wardens there, and brief ceremonies and training sessions. So that's that. Item 13, discuss non-resident membership for Land Stewardship Committee. Mr. Snyder-Grant raised this question.
Turns out that for proper liability coverage, we have all of our land stewards who are assigned to particular parcels to be associate members. So we got a lot of associate members and a lot of parcels. Turns out, if you have people walking around with, sharp equipment, you want them to have good liability insurance. So they've identified, the land stewards have identified a possible new land steward who lives just over the line in a different town. And the VCC has looked at this question in the past and determined that it's fine. There's a very few special boards and committees chartered by state law that specifically require residents, but in all these others, the select board can choose to appoint non-resident committee members. This was done, for example, to bring non-resident owners of Acton businesses into some of our planning committees. So I just wanted to make sure the board was comfortable with this general idea for the Land Steward Committee before having the VCC run through the interview process with this person. Discussion points might include whether a non-resident associate member could ever become a full voting member, and whether we want to set an expectation about how many or what percentage of associate members can be from out of town, or do you want to leave it all of this, open?
Okay, thank you. And I'm actually the liaison to the Land Stewardship Committee, and we are constantly churning through folks. There's lots of territory out there, and it's great to have volunteers, whether they be Acton residents or not, but certainly any reaction from other members of the board? David?
Yeah, I would be comfortable making associate non-voting members non-Acton residents. I'd have more reservations with the voting members myself. I'm wondering whether we should actually change the charge to officially say that, just so the VCC can, when we're talking 4 years, 5 years down the road, what's our policy here? Again, I think our policy should be enumerated. And if we do that, I was trying to find it here. I can't seem to find it. I'm pretty sure that Bettina Abe sent us a note asking that we increase the term of the associate members from 1 year to 3 years. Yeah. So if we choose to change the charge, we could do both of those things. It seems reasonable to me. Almost all of our committees are 3 years, and it just reduces overhead of having to, reappoint people every year. So I would be comfortable in both those things, but I would like to modify the charge to say that associate members can be whatever we want to say, residents of towns adjacent to Acton or something.
Okay, great. Comments from other members of the board? Yeah.
Sometimes on an initial term, it's good to have a single year. Then if you get a dud, it's easy to let them go. But, I struggled through that painful experience when I was the chair of the LSC. So it's good to have short terms. But after the first term, 3 years, it's lovely, less work.
Okay.
Just one quick question.
Fran?
Has there been interest from other towns? Folks?
Yeah, there's a specific person they have in mind who
yeah.
lives right next to a conservation land, but over the border. So they wanted to bring that person forward. So if the board's comfy with that, I'll go ahead and have that person go through the VCC process and put them on the consent calendar. And it sounds like then you get the job of taking, assuming you're still the liaison of the LSC in a couple weeks, because who knows, you'll take that back to them and say, let's change the charter and bring it back. Okay.
Okay. Imogen.
Thanks. So a few questions. So if we allowed non-residents to become associate members, by default, they wouldn't be able to vote. Only full members can vote. So do we want to put in something that says, that a non-resident can become an associate member or a full-time member, depending on that process through which they move, and they could be a voting member? Or should we codify that?
I'm happy to let the LSC make the recommendation, depending on what makes sense to them. I don't have a strong feeling about it. Do you?
No, I don't really have many thoughts on that. I would talk to it, I've got this in my mind, talk to a larger issue. I know that there are several other boards and committees in town that are actually wrestling with the same idea. Members of existing committees who move out of town temporarily due to housing situations. There's a couple of individuals that have wanted to stay members in some fashion. So, this might be setting a bit of a precedent, which is probably a good thing, so know how to go about it. David?
Yes, whatever we decide, again, I would just prefer that it be in the charge so that we know what we're doing. And I'm fine with saying that associate members' first year is a 1 year term, subsequent terms are 3 years terms. Whatever we want to put in the charge is fine. I don't know whether that gives a chicken and egg thing with the VCC, whether we want to, bring a charge back to the next meeting and vote it up or whatever, but you guys can decide that. I also think that it's really important, and we could add it to all of them if we wanted, that full members have to be town residents. I think it's in the past it's set up conflicts of interest that I personally haven't been comfortable with when people have moved out of town. and made decisions for us that I thought were not appropriate. Anyway, that's my feeling. I think, you know, if we're modifying the charge in this case anyway, we can just say, to clarify what Heminger was bringing up, that the full members would need to be Acton residents, which means no one could be promoted if they were out. But I wouldn't mind adding that to every board or committee that the select board charters.
Okay, great. I think, Jim, we've got the sense of the board. I'd say reach out to VCC and have them interview this person. And in the meantime, I'll talk with you because you've got a much deeper history with land stewardship than I do, and we can come up with a revised charge that we can bring back. So unless there's any other questions on that.
Tara Mustakin. What about the boards and committees that have town staff as a voting member? I can think of one, the Water Resources Advisory Committee has a staff member from the Acton Water District. I think there might be a couple of other committees where there's a staff member having a vote. I would hope that we would re-examine that. I feel like it's important to have the residents be represented. And staff is staff, that's great. But I think that it's important for the voting members to be residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I think we're ready to hit the consent items. So I'll read through, and if anybody wishes to hold, please say hold. Item 14, approve meeting minutes, April 25th, 2022. Item 15, accept gift of $750 from Acton Pharmacy to support the 2022 Summer Concert Series and special events. Item 16, accept gift of $500 from David Martin and Miriam Lezak to support the 2022 Summer Concert Series and special events.
I'd like to hold that.
Item 17, accept gift of $1,500 from Rapscallion Table and Tap to support the 2022 Summer Concert Series and special events. 18, accept gift of $750 from various donations to support the Acton Dog Park. And 19, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Boston Area Gleaners, Stonefield Farm, June 25th, 2022. Item 20, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Rebecca Higgins, Powder Mill Animal Hospital, June 3rd, 2022. And item 21, accept gift to Sidewalk Fund of $65,000 from Applewood Realty Company pursuant to the settlement agreement related to 62 to 64 Pope Road. So I'll entertain a motion to accept items 14 and 15 and 17 through 21 inclusive.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Snyder Grant.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Martin. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Item 16, Mr. Martin.
Yeah. I would just like to abstain to this one, that's all.
And I just want to thank you for making such a generous donation. Yeah.
Very good. Accept a motion to accept item 16, accept gift of $500 with our thanks from David Martin and Miriam Lezak.
You made a motion?
No, I would accept the motion.
Oh, okay, sure. So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, one abstention. All right. I'm looking for one more motion.
Motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry.
I'll second that.
Okay, looks like moved by Fran, seconded by Hemager. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much, and I thank everybody on the board. This was a tough meeting, and it could have gone really badly, and I'm really delighted with the way it turned out, not because of who got elected, but just because the way we comported ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.